Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Pitkin County Board of County Commissioners work session on Friday, November 12th. This is a extraordinarily scheduled work session so we can conduct interviews for our Airport Advisory Board, which we are creating for the first time as a result of a recommendation from the ASE Vision Committee recommendations. And we are looking forward to this board. We're grateful to the 74 applicants who applied, and especially to the 15 who are interviewing with us this week. So this is our second day of interviews. We are scheduled to interview from about 9:30 to noon, and then we have another hour scheduled for the board to discuss if we're prepared to select our board appointments today. We will be appointing 7 regular members and 2 alternate members to this board. We'll also have to talk about staggered terms, which we created when we created the bylaws. And so I think we'll do what we did on Wednesday, worked pretty well. We have 15 minutes for each candidate. I will set a timer for 13 minutes as just a 2-minute warning to get last questions and wrapped up thoughts in, and then a little bit of transition time between candidates. I think today, maybe we'll start with Greg and go this way, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we caught you off guard.
If not, Patty always is prepared,
I'm
so
ready
I'm
to
sure
go,
she
Greg,
could.
if you want to defer.
What do you prefer, Greg?
I'm fine.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So our first interview is with Valerie Braun, who is no stranger to the airport. Nice to see you, and I will turn it to Greg to kick us
Great.
off.
Welcome, Valerie. Nice to see you in person. Masked anyway.
Glad to see all of you too.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. I'd love to hear a little bit about your move off from Woody Creek, because that took me by surprise when I saw that. First of all, but then also, this is a balancing act. How do you perceive the balancing act of, bringing a change to the airport into the community?
Well, after a couple of years being part of the ASE Vision Committee and doing a lot of studying, I think it is a major balancing act. There are entities in the community that would like to see less activity at the airport, more safe activity at the airport, more activity at the airport. So from the tourism standpoint, there may be people who would like to see our airport become more of a destination from the East Coast. So I think the balancing act is something that we experienced as we were studying towards our recommendations that we made, and I don't see that changing, to be honest. I think we still have a lot of work to do.
Great. And then you moved to the frying pan. How are you affected by the airport now?
Well, after 48 years of being in the final approach to the airport and for departure, moving up the frying pan, I thought I wouldn't hear so much airplane noise, but the truth of the matter is that where we are, which is the 7 Castles, about 4 miles up the frying pan, I'm pretty sure almost all the commercial aircraft come or approach right over where we are. Of course, they're much higher. It's not as noisy, but there is quite a significant amount of traffic there. And this is a temporary location for us. My husband and I are building a house down in RVR in Carbondale, and I've spent a great deal of time down there, walking the hood and enjoying their facilities and stuff while we're waiting to get our house done. And you'd be surprised how much aircraft noise there is there, all the way down in Carbondale. And I would say that's predominantly general aviation jets that make it that far down and still on their departure routes, mostly departures down there. So I do feel that there is an impact throughout our valley, and I really appreciate your decision to think of this as the Roaring Fork Valley, the effects that the airport has on the Roaring Fork Valley. I think it's real and important, and it should, what happens throughout our valley should inform all the decisions that we make.
Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Steve?
Hi, Valerie.
Hey, Steve.
I want to drill down a little bit on you living down in the Down Valley area now. And as you may be aware, as I counted, we have 5 people we're interviewing who don't live in Pickens County. We can only have 2 on the board, so it's you have a little stiffer competition to get on the board. But I'm curious about how you would feel about representing the entire Roaring Fork Valley, because would be the position you would be in instead of the Woody Creek community or some, just a neighborhood in Pickens County. And what issues do you see that really affect the down valley parts of the valley as opposed to those who live closer to the airport?
Well, I think the reality I think we all know this, that a great many people who work up here live down there. And so they are affected because of their work space, in the vicinity of the actual airport. But like I referenced a couple minutes ago, the airport actually does have pretty significant effects all the way down the valley. And the other aspect I think that's important to consider as far as representing the whole valley is the number of people that utilize our airport that live here. They're flyers, and so I think it's important to think, that I may be representing people who have more interest in, are you going to have enough long-term parking so that I can come up and leave my car and fly out and pick it up when I come back, and that sort of thing. So whether some of the issues would be slightly different for down valley people, I'm not quite so sure about that, because I think we all face those same things if we utilize the airport as flyers. But we also, we live and breathe the same air and hear the same stuff, and so the impacts on us may be in our workplace or our home place or in our travel up and down the valley. So representing outside of Woody Creek, I still sort of think I might be representing Woody Creek a bit too, because I lived there for 48 years, and I have a very strong historic understanding of how the airport has developed over nearly 50 years.
Okay, thank you.
Valerie, so there's been some time to let the Vision Committee recommendations, as well as your minority report that I appreciate you presented to us, settle. And I'm wondering, have you had any different takeaways from those recommendations, or how the board ultimately reviewed them, adopted them, added some new language, I think, to strengthen some of the components of it? And what strikes you as most important for the Airport Advisory Board to start tackling?
Well, I'm sure you remember, even though I wrote a minority opinion, it was pretty narrow. Generally speaking, I did endorse the bulk of the recommendations. I certainly feel like we need to do something new for a terminal, and a reorganization of the layout of the airport. I think I learned over my 2 years of studying it is probably critical. I am not going to sit here and say that I have come around to the idea that I think we need to widen the runway, because I am not sure about that still. I think that's something that we still need to study, and I think the way that the board accepted the recommendations, there was room for that, space and time and room for that discussion to continue. And there are some things that are developing in the aviation industry right now that might be of interest to continue studying. As an example, Mitsubishi, who bought Bombardier's CRJ program, is talking about the possibility of reinstating the program. And I have actually some websites, if you would like me to send it to you later, they're just websites discussing that possibility. So I think, like we said many, many times when we were coming to our ending product, things are changing constantly. And so I think we do need to be flexible and open to more discussion on certain aspects of it. I don't know where the county is as far as picking somebody to help design a new airport or anything like that. I have been out of the loop for, nearly a year. So I'm going to be interested to catch back up with that. But I do think I have quite a bit of a background knowledge to draw from, if and might be helpful as part of that discussion.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Francie.
We've met before, Francie. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. So I'm different than anybody else involved with the airport because I have not flown out of the Aspen Airport in 25 years. So,
Turn the mic on.
I have not flown out of the Aspen Airport in 25 years. I don't need the Aspen Airport, so my perspective is a little bit different than other people's. And for me, I just go to Denver. There were just too many canceled flights over the years, and plus the accidents and stuff. I was just like, I'll just drive to Denver, But I hear from a lot of people who use the airport all the time, but they're upset about the noise and the pollution and the. So somehow, if we're going to have an airport here in this tiny little valley, we have to figure out how to live with this or how to reduce it, of course. I mean, that's obviously the first thing, is to reduce the noise and the emissions as much as possible. But I'm wondering, have you ever considered what this end of the valley would be like without an airport?
Well, when I first moved to the valley, it wasn't much of an impact, to be honest, the airport at that time. I mean, almost 50 years ago. Now, there were some pretty noisy, aircraft that used to come in but not anywhere near the volume. And that's, I think, maybe where things have changed significantly at the airport, is just the sheer volume. Mm-hmm. And when you consider the fact that general aviation amounts to 75 to 85% of that versus the commercial side, it's a lot to consider, and it's a lot to have evolved over time. We certainly, the ASE Vision Committee struggled mightily over what enlarging the airport might mean in terms of growing our volume and the kinds of aircraft that might be coming in, and I think that's still something that needs to be seriously discussed. And as part of the design features of the airport, we may be able to do, and I think we can do, a lot as far as pollution that we're making on the ground. I think some of those things are already happening at the airport, the APU noise, and that they're electric rather than fueled by some, I guess it was diesel. But anyway, the point of the story is that I think we have a long way to go, but there are resources and there are opportunities that we can perhaps put into place that will help modify the effects of the airport positively.
Sure, yes.
So, obviously you haven't considered not having an airport, but so do you see any way of reducing the amount of GA flights that come in and out? I mean, can you imagine a system under which we would have fewer flights?
Well, knowing that we can't make a system for ourselves that doesn't get approved by the FAA, and knowing that the FAA has tried a few ways to try and, I don't know about limit, but manage the volume better, I do have concerns about bigger aircraft coming in here if we widen the airport, the runway at the airport, and so I think we have to be careful about that.
Bigger GA aircraft or bigger commercial?
Well, if you have bigger commercial, you have to have bigger GA. There's no separating that out. That's what we know from the FAA, that they're not going to limit. We can't limit GA. So, and as far as thinking about not having an airport at all, I don't think this end of the valley would survive that. So I don't think that's really an option. I think we have to have an airport.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Patty?
Yeah, hi Valerie again. Hi again. Nice to see you as always. Valerie and I go back to second grade.
Well, second grade, Trevor.
I have just kind of and it's perfect actually for me to be at the summary kind of point, not that we don't have a little more time, but looking at all the issues and things that have been going on with your report, what would you say your priority issue is, your issue of greatest concern and interest?
Well, from the first day we all looked at each other as the ASE Vision Committee, safety was our number one priority. I believe that will continue. You know, it's a very safe airport when you look at the history of commercial operations here. We've had a significant number of accidents on the other side, on the general aviation side. I think that's important for us to keep right in front of our brains as we study what we might do. I do think that, well, I don't think, I know that we are completely constrained by the space, the site, and we have to be careful about bigger aircraft coming in here and having a place for them to park. It's a pretty simple, situation. Same situation we have here in Aspen with automobiles. So I don't know that I have one thing. I think it's important to get the terminal right. I think it's important to reorganize so that it functions better out there. And I think that we may have well, let's just face it, we have an economic situation facing us that may be the guiding factor for the next 5 years. It's hard to say right at this moment, but inflation is definitely something to consider, and to take on a multi-$100-million project. I know I'm building a house, and I know what that means. And so it's a much smaller house than I used to have, and it's significant. So I think the advisory board's going to have a lot on their plate when it comes to not only like design and how to make it work in the community and make everybody happy and blah, 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 but also, how are you going to pay for it, and how are you going to make it, how are you going to be able to keep it running in a potentially difficult economy.
Yeah, thanks.
So Valerie, we're right about at time. Do you have any final thoughts for our consideration you'd like to share?
Well, I do thank you very much for giving me the chance to come and speak with you. Somebody said to me, why do you want to do this for again, and that somebody was my husband. But it's interesting, and it's motivating to be involved in a project that's so important to the community. And like I said, I think we should work really hard to get it right.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
I just have one last thing.
Sure.
I just want to remind you, there's an airport in Glenwood that's having a lot of difficulty right now. So please, you don't have to get involved in that one, too.
I think that one's probably going to solve itself.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thanks,
Nice to see all of
Valerie.
you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Thank you for your service so far also.
Yeah. All right, everybody doing okay? I think,
Can we just take 1 minute so I can?
yeah, sure. And Rich, I was gonna shoot you an email. Could you send out the list of how we initially scored the candidates? 'Cause I can't find it. Thanks. All right, Sean, I will invite you up to get settled, and then when our board's ready, we'll get started.
I think it's this one with the color coding.
Kelly, would it help just have one on paper for you to write on?
Oh, for me, email is fine, but I don't know if other folks want it in the room. We will have a break. We could print something off too.
I feel like I'm in a courtroom. I didn't
You
do
can
it.
relax. It's really, yeah. I've seen like
sometimes
some of
is
my
a-
other county commissioners like tables, and they're like all up really high. And
Oh, I
like,
love
look
that.
down on everybody. I'm
We
like, oh my
purposely
gosh.
designed the shirt not to do that.
Yeah.
But we do have an ejection seat button.
Go for it.
I know, it'd be a new flight, it'd be a new experience, wouldn't it? Always wanted to do that.
You notice I'm always moving my chair around just in case.
Okay, am I on deck?
Ready? No, yeah, Steve will be up. Are we ready to go?
Steve's
I'm
up.
ready.
Board members?
you.
Okay. All right, so Sean, you probably heard my intro, but we'll, we have 15 minutes scheduled. We can run over a little bit, so that's no problem. I will set a 13-minute timer just to give us a 2-minute warning for last questions and thoughts. And we will turn to Steve, who gets to ask the first question on this round.
So, a real quick personal question, is Sally DeWolf your mom?
No, Kathy DeWolf.
Kathy DeWolf, okay. Well, I know both of them.
There you go. I had a 15
Okay.
shot.
So, okay, that answers that question. So, my my biggest question is, you actually work at the airport as a flight instructor. I don't know what is that, could you describe that business? Is it like a private business that you work for someone else, or do you have your own business? And what is your financial arrangement with the airport itself in terms of, being a flight instructor there?
Yeah, so people either have their own plane or want to learn how to fly, and I help them do that. A big part of my business is doing mountain flying instruction, which is, we've seen last year, if you don't get that, it can be pretty deadly. So that's mainly what I do. That's actually kind of my side job. My main job is working for a private jet company remotely. So I do work at the Aspen Airport a little bit, but it's not my end-all be-all. It's kind of not necessarily the reason I'm here. I'm not here to propagate my own financial interest as a flight instructor, and no matter what happens to the airport, it wouldn't really affect that. The runway's already wide enough for the planes I fly, so, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sean,
Yeah.
nice to meet you, and
You
thanks
too.
for applying. I'm wondering, are you familiar with the ACE, the Vision Committee recommendations and the ones that we ultimately kind of changed a little bit and adopted? And then, what do you think of them? Are we on the right track? Did we get it right? What needs more work? What would you
I've
think?
looked at it very little deliberately. If I get hired, I kind of want to go into this with a completely blank slate and no preconceptions, and I want to make sure I talk to the right people who are going to give me a non-biased explanation. But I think you're dealing with the same struggle that Aspen and the world at large is dealing with: growth versus keeping something the way we like it, and how do you balance those two? So I don't know a lot about the vision, but the broad strokes of it are bigger airport, smaller airport, how many flights, noise.
And what
if
do
I
you
understand
think?
that. I think it's extremely complicated, and there's no right answer to this. My company flies out of airports all around the country, a lot of them noise restricted, et cetera, and I've seen how different airports have dealt with that. And there's kind of no perfect solution. You just have to come up with the best compromise that helps the most amount of people, deciding when flights can operate, their noise restrictions, et cetera. But then also talking to see how many people use that airport. So there's no easy solution. I don't have the answers. I'm just another person asking questions, honestly.
And what are your feelings about growth in general in the community? It's a topic that we have to wrestle with a lot.
That's such a hard existential question. I was born here. If I could have kept Aspen exactly the way I had when I was growing up, I would love to do that, but it's hard for me to say, I get to live here, but you don't. And so how do you balance those two things? I think it just comes down to the consensus. What do we all want? And it's on a case-by-case basis. You have to decide, is this growth okay? No one wants this to turn into a city, but, we can't stop everything. So I don't know. Those are really tricky questions. I can't sit here and give an answer in 1 second that's going to be satisfying. So
there
it would be
are
my
value
job
judgments.
to try and take all the information and come up with the best solution that helps everyone.
Thank you. Nancy?
Hi.
Hi.
So you've been flying out of here for quite a while, and so you've seen a huge increase in GA traffic. And I'm wondering, first of all, are your wait times for being able to come and go, have they been altered quite a bit? You have to wait longer? And
Oh, there are days. I've been at that line 30 minutes. The chief problem is at this airport, you can only come in one direction and take off the other. So they have to have a huge amount of space for those two things not to be dangerous with each other. Other airports, you can make a giant conga line. But yeah, it's definitely very busy.
And can you imagine any way to reduce the number of GA flights or make them easier to deal with, just the whole GA side? Have you got any ideas about how to make that work for people like you?
Yeah,
Smaller
so,
operators?
well, as the previous applicant said, there's strict FAA rules. You can't just say, you get to land, you don't. But really, from my private jet experience, the number one way to reduce GA is to change the cost. If you increase the landing fees, a lot of operators are going to send out quotes to their clients about landing at this airport, and it's going to be too expensive. And they're not going to want to come here. That would
Not
be
just parking, but actually landing.
Right. So if you change the fee structure or the fuel price, you could alter the GA flow at this airport. Now, what consequences might that have? I don't know. But that would be the way that I would see it. But I don't know a lot about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, other than that, there's not a lot you can do. And kind of one of the more, I worked at the FBO there as well, and kind of one of the more sad things is some of the biggest jets you see have the least amount of people. It'll be a giant Gulfstream with one person on it. So I don't know that there's a way to sort of, do a HOV lane of you have not enough people to come into Aspen. I don't think that's possible, but that's kind of the spiritual problem with GA there. Is there are a lot of people who are pretty good. They load up a plane and it's small, it's fuel efficient. That seems like a great tenant to me. How do you separate those? It might not even be possible.
But possibly some kind of staggered fee structure.
Yeah, I think if you increase the fee on large GA aircraft, A, they might not even notice it.
Yeah.
But B, if that makes them think more carefully about doing an operation here, if it's really necessary, or if they can go to rifle. I don't know. There's lots of interesting solutions. I don't know that any of them would work. It's really tricky, but I'd love to look into them, try and figure it out.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts.
Patty?
I came up with a new one. We're going to call it a jet pool instead of a carpool. I'm going to get people for jet pooling. So that's going to be one of my new things, guys, just so you know. I'm going to kind of, and I appreciate the fact that, you're in the beginning stages of learning, because it's a lot to learn, so just to give you a heads up.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, though.
You are the same age as my children. Did you go to school up Valley or down Valley?
In Aspen.
So you went to school with my kids,
Oh, who were they?
Trevor and Tracy Clapper.
Oh, it's not ringing a bell. I was
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
learner.
then you were on the quiet side, because my kids were not on the quiet side. But anyway, back to the point here. So if you were to look at all of the issues I'm sure you're aware of, the traffic issues at the airport, safety issues, environmental issues, what would you say, in your mind, looking at it with fresh eyes, is your issue of greatest importance, concern, interest? What do you think that's like the number one issue we should be maybe addressing at this time?
I've had a lot of kind of recent tangential experiences with boards, and sometimes they're not positive. A lot of people come onto a board with an agenda, an issue, a bias. I want to see this happen. I'm going to join that board and make it happen. I don't really have any issues. I am a flight instructor. I use the airport, but I'm also an Aspenite, an environmentalist. I have both thoughts in my head. I like the airport, but I appreciate all the concerns against it. So I don't have any main overriding issue that I want to see. I just want to try and come up with the best solution that helps the most amount of people, whatever that might be. And that might be a solution that is against me as a flight instructor. But if it benefits most people, then I'm going to go with that one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, but I don't really have any major access to grinder issues.
Great.
Just trying to keep an open mind.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, thanks. Greg?
Great, yeah, great. Sean, thanks a lot. It's great to meet somebody who grew up here. I remember Kathy, and I'm trying to remember, did she work at the schools, or where did I know her from?
She was a teacher here about 1 million years ago.
Yeah,
Don't tell her I
that
said
would
that.
have been right.
She does real estate now.
Right, yeah, okay.
Yep.
And you live in Basalt now?
Yeah, on the Pickens County side, if that makes any
Right, yeah,
difference.
great. So you're still in Pickens County. All right, you're still one of us. I would love to ask, first of all, you're talking about you want to help the largest number of people, and I'm thinking, is there a geographic locale? Are you thinking globally, or are you thinking community-wise? Like when you talk about wanting to, do the best solution for the most number of people, are you talking about winter ski visitors? Or are you talking about local Pickens County residents or Valley residents? I'm trying to get a grip on who you're contemplating.
I would say firstly just the Valley in general, but it is the Aspen Airport. So if Aspen's the town that's going to be affected by its existence, they have to be considered. But also, just kind of thinking about how this affects anyone. And maybe that's a tourist coming from a different side of the world that's still a person interacting with this valley. I don't know. We have this really special place, and just what can we do to make it accessible and for everyone that we can think of? I don't really know that I have an exact answer to that question, except, I guess I would start with Aspen itself. But if it affects someone right across the line, then that makes a difference as well. I mean, Aspen is a weird place. It's a small town with a global reach. how do you reconcile those two things? That's tricky.
And when you think of Aspen, are you thinking just the town, the city limits, or are you thinking, I tend to think of Aspen as the valley, it's our,
Yeah, there's no delineation there. Like, at
Right.
what point is Aspen or not? I think you just have to use your judgment about, if someone in Rifle has something to say about our airport, that does matter, but it isn't as important necessarily as someone who has to live next to it. So I would say I would try to help people that are closest in a proportional way. So someone most affected by it, they're going to have the most amount of my attention, but if someone is far away, I still want to think about their thoughts, et cetera.
Right.
But
could
I
I
don't
ask
know,
one,
it's tricky.
one more? You're an aviator. Clearly, that's amazing. You've really come a long way in a fairly short time as an aviator. You've got
I've
a lot
tried.
of hours in helicopters. It's very exciting to read your resume. Where do you think the aviation industry is going? Like, what could you imagine could change the game, or at least influence how we decide to build this new transit hub we're talking about?
Yeah, if you open up Popular Mechanics magazines, you'll see everything about like autonomous electric vehicles, reshaping. I don't think change, especially in the aviation world, happens very fast at all. I think the system we have today is going to propagate for a long time. I don't think there's going to be anything that would really completely change anything in the next several years. It's too expensive and it's too hard to make change in the aviation world. So I think on a smaller scale, you're just going to see slight improvements in aircraft efficiency, fuel burn, et cetera. That's really the closest thing you're going to have to change.
Great, thank you.
All right, we still have time. Other
So-
questions? You have a-
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sean, you and one other person who's being interviewed both attended the aviation school in North Dakota.
Oh, small world.
And I'm just curious how your education there affects your way of thinking. Did you and you probably took a lot of technical and flying kind of classes, but did you take classes in sort of airport planning and airport management and those sorts of issues that?
You kind of got education in almost everything. I got to hear stories about how all sorts of different things work, and it kind of made me realize that there's so much I don't know. You could spend your whole life as an airport planner and maybe learn half of it. So I have some broad strokes and some concepts, but it's incredibly complicated. A lot of my professors would say that aviation is the most complicated industry on the planet. You have a product that doesn't exist, all these safety issues, regulations, et cetera. It's hard. And all I can do is my best.
So what's your long-term aspirations for being involved in the industry?
I just like to fly, whatever shape that takes. I kind of stopped asking the universe for specific things and just sort of sit back and see what it gives me instead and keep an open mind with that. So I don't have any concrete goals except flying around and living here, obviously, enjoying Aspen.
Yeah,
Those
there
are
were
my
a lot
goals.
in my generation who, their first goal was to survive Vietnam. They got a lot of their flying time in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then came back here and, flew fixed wing and helicopters both and making a living, but without bullets whizzing around at them.
Yeah, I can't imagine that transition. I've talked to a lot of those guys on the helicopter side, and they're flying there and they're flying here are very different experiences.
Uh-huh.
So I do have a question. So one of the things that we were hoping to charge this advisory board with is looking at creating a training program for our GA pilots who maybe are unfamiliar with the airport. Do you have any ideas about how that could be successful?
Yeah, I think that's a huge component of the safety issue. There's the training side and there's the compliance side. So private jet companies certified by the FAA can have restrictions on themselves as far as what they can do. Like, my company can't land here at night. So there's the compliance side to think about of what things do we want to implement, wind limitations, et cetera, on private jet aircraft. And then the training side is really huge. This airport is completely different than any other airport I've flown in. I thought in North Dakota that I could handle high winds, no problem. But the winds here are bizarre. They're so weird and shifty. So yeah, the training side of that is a huge component of the safety of GA. Airliners are kind of good at doing their own thing and, you know, controlling that. But anyone can get in a plane and come here right now if they want to. And how do you kind of help them out to better understand the nuances of this airport without them just going for it? That's definitely something that I think would help a lot of people.
Great, thank you. Yeah, yeah, we can do final questions
so
and
the
thoughts.
company you work for has a rule that they cannot do night landings here.
Correct. After sunset, we can't. So
Is that part of it? How did they reach that conclusion? Is it an insurance issue or what is it?
So if you have your own plane, you can essentially, in the FAA eyes, do whatever you want with it. But the second you interact with the general public, you cross a line that the FAA has a huge wall, and that's the charter, where if your aircraft is going to interact with the general public, they want a huge layer of safety involved in that. So when you want to create an aircraft that can service the general public here, you have to get a 135 certificate or an airline certificate. And part of that is the FAA looking at your operation, the jets you have, the people, the experience, and you together kind of come up with your own manual of what you can do and you can't do. And so it's sanctioned by the FAA, and you have to follow it. So our company, we don't come into Aspen a huge amount, and they came up with, you know, we just don't want to do night landings. And so that's kind of how that process works. But each company can have their own restrictions, and they might be really careful, they might have none. It all depends on the company, the FAA, and how they feel about Aspen.
Interesting, thank you.
All right, final thoughts for our consideration, Sean.
Oh, not really. I just want to say thanks for the time. Appreciate you guys putting the effort into this. I hope we can come up with a good plan that helps everyone, or as many people as possible.
Thanks for your interest.
Great, it was really nice to meet you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks for
guys.
coming in.
Good luck.
Be careful out
Thank
there.
you.
I will.
Okay. All right, does the board need any transition time? Just some paper shuffling? Auden, if you'd like to, yeah, Auden, if you'd like to come on up, please. If you're okay to start
Yeah.
2 minutes early.
All right.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Biggest question, when's it gonna snow?
I know, and I'm not equipped to answer that.
Yeah, I did
Sorry.
notice driving in this morning, there was snowmaking going on all the way to the top Ajax, and I was trying to remember if I'd ever remembered seeing that before.
Yeah.
Because it's only the second year of snowmaking from to the top.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I guess
I
I
know that
didn't
one
notice it before.
firsthand.
It's like, wow, there were plumes. It's like, yeehaw, here it comes.
Yeah.
Also in Thunder Bowl, I was surprised. It was 43 degrees, my car said.
Yeah,
And
and Thunderbolt is AVSC, it's not Aspen Skiing Company, and they have contracts to have snow ready so skiers can come in from elsewhere, but that's actually, and we could talk about this instead of the airport.
We haven't
That's something
officially
that
started.
you have noticed Skico has done. We used to make snow in October, and then the pile would melt. You'd be blowing in 40-degree weather. We said, don't do that at all. Don't start till November. It's more efficient, but you also don't trigger these big demand fees from the utility from starting up your giant compressors. So we don't do that. We wait. And but AVSC has a whole different paradigm, but they're not us, and it's a separate accounting.
Interesting.
And I actually,
Separate approval.
when I saw those mounds going up a few weeks ago, I called Chris Davenport, who's AVSC board chair, and I was like, what are you doing?
And it's melting.
Yeah, but he said, look, we have obligations here, so,
It's good to hear they're blowing on this mountain now.
yeah.
So the clock hasn't started ticking yet on your interview?
No.
What else should we talk about?
I know,
You
we're
still get your
ecstatic.
15 minutes of fame with it, so.
Okay, good.
All right, are we ready to get started?
Sure.
Sure.
All right, great. Well, Auden, welcome. Nice to see you
Good
again.
to be here.
I get to kick off this round, and I guess I'm wondering, you have such expertise in the area of the environment, and we're, really hoping our airport becomes the greenest, cleanest one in the world. But I am wondering, how are you feeling about taking deep dives into things like planning, safety training programs for general aviation, or looking at, business operation models for the various vendors and contracts that we have at the airport? Because that's sort of part of the scope too.
Yeah, Well, you know, I was on town council in Basalt, and that required this whole range of things. And just kind of philosophically, as a human being, I'm not a one-trick pony. I'm interested in all kinds of different things. So those areas are not my expertise, but I certainly have business experience as well. So it's interesting to me. I will say, look, I'm not coming in here to develop a business plan for the airport. Specifically, I have expertise in climate, and that's my primary interest. But the beauty of this project is it sort of incorporates a lot of the things society's dealing with as a whole, economically, climatically, what the future looks like in terms of growth. So I'm a guy who's interested in a lot of different things, and I think that is going to be a plus of this project.
Great, thank you. Francie?
Hi, Auden.
Hey,
I'm wondering about your role as a environmental specialist on this committee, and whether you're hoping to have some influence on how we can increase fuel efficiency, reduce emissions, and also the development of the terminal in a way that is beautiful, efficient, and sustainable.
yeah. I mean, I think, so in the big picture, Aspen has a role in the universe, and it's to create models for the rest of the world. We get influential people, we get famous people, we get a ton of press. This is what we've tried to do at Aspen Skiing Company. And by the way, so I don't forget, I have copies of our new sustainability report for you all that came out yesterday. I'll leave them for you. So I think the airport is this opportunity to be a shining city on the hill. And to me, there are four big areas that are of great interest for role modeling for the country and the world. One is the runway itself, in terms of what kinds of planes are going to be allowed to come in and what the future of aircraft look like. That's going to be informed by facts, basically, efficiency, size of planes, what the future looks like. The next piece is this question of, what is the next generation of zero carbon or electric aircraft, and how can we get those in here sooner, say, than other places, or at least influence the conversation? This is something that Aspen Skiing Company has done, for example, with snowcats, where we say, give us the best snowcat in creation. We'll demo it here. We'll talk about it. We'll make noise about it, and we'll spread the word. So on our mountain, we have these tier 5 snowcats that are more efficient than anything in the United States. They exceed EPA requirements, and they're not even certified. They're a European certification. So that's an example of what you could do. You could say, hey, manufacturer, you want to get traction with your cool airplane? Let's try it here. Now, there may be issues with Aspen being the place where you try a new airplane. We'll figure that out. And then the other two areas I think are super interesting are how you build the building precisely. And you all know our work on electrification, but there's efficiency opportunities. You could make this thing zero carbon and a model. So again, people fly in and they get educated. It's not just a green building, but there's info on it when you arrive. So it's a educational tool in addition to being a good building. And then the last piece that I think is sort of wide open running field is, how do you get from the airport to other places? And I know that there's been conversation and some general plan that this will be bus served by bus rapid transit, and that's great. That's how our community works. But I wouldn't rule out really creative, interesting things that have been brought up, like, can you do a gondola type transportation to Aspen? Can you address that in different ways? And it may be, oh, we can't do that, or the train's already left the station. On all these conversations, we're going to have to think differently, because we don't have a ton of time on climate, and we're going to have to be bold. And if Aspen can't be bold, nobody can. We have the resources to succeed and to fail, and to talk about those publicly.
Yeah, and I also heard somebody talking about a gondola up to Snowmass from the airport.
Yeah, now the interesting thing about, so a gondola to Snowmass would address traffic, and it would address Brush Creek Road, which is dangerous and narrow, and by the way, a wildlife barrier. I think you'd have a conflict with the environmental community, or a piece of the environmental community, if you tried to run a gondola up there, because you'd go through sensitive area. My personal feeling is that that's a European solution that works, and that the road is a wildlife barrier.
Yeah.
This is pie in the sky, but our resort could be one that transported people using electricity on gondolas and less on vehicles, and that it seems sensible. That's a huge price tag, I think, on the order of 150 million to do that kind of thing. Whereas airport to Aspen wouldn't be as much.
Yeah. Thank you, Auden.
Patty?
Okay, Auden, I know you well enough to know, but I'm gonna like have you stretch your brain. For all the issues that have come up at the airport, what would you say is the issue of priority, issue of, well, I know what your greatest interest and concern would be, but as far as the general population, what issue would you think is of greatest importance?
Well, I mean, on this, I do think that if you look at the climate problem and you look at the carbon emissions in the United States, the majority is transportation, 30%. And the toughest nut to crack is probably aviation. So to me, the opportunity to dig in on this and say, how is this going to look? How are we going to be leaders? How are we going to move the needle? The gentleman before me said that we're only going to see incremental progress on airplanes in the next number of years. Well, we have to do better than that. And so yes, we know that there are more efficient planes. It is amazing how each generation of new commercial airplane is very much more efficient, but then what's the next step? So this carbon question, I think, is seminal, and I think it enables us to talk about a lot of other issues around economies and climate in the process.
Great, thanks.
Greg?
What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen sparrow?
Is this a Zen seminar?
It's a Greg seminar.
So, yeah, I was going to ask you about transportation. You mentioned, that's a big deal. Getting to and from the airport is a critical thing as well. I'm just wondering if we're going to see transportation alternatives that could get us to other airports or to get us to this airport. I'm glad to hear you say you think that the slow plodding progress in aviation is what's expected, but it's not good enough, because I think that's how I feel. So I agree with you. I just wonder if people are going to have a choice to get to Gypsum almost as easily as getting here, especially from the lower valley, if Cottonwood Pass gets developed, or if other. So looking at transportation is important, and I think you just covered that. I guess my next question is, you're a prominent figure. You're a big voice in the community and on issues. How do you work on a team, like a visioning team? How do you see the team coming together, and what can you bring to it, and how will you work with this group of people?
Yeah, so I'm 51, and as I've gotten older, my approach to engagement in the world has been to step back and to fade back a little. It may not look like that, but I'm interested in elevating other people who are leaders. I'm interested in learning about things I don't know about. I'm not particularly interested about leading from the front or pushing a specific agenda, though my general agenda on climate I am obviously aggressively pushing. So, a lot of my work in the last 5 to 10 years has been on diverse teams. On the Air Quality Control Commission, I was with gas industry people and conservatives from Western Colorado. So I will say, as any other human being knows, it's difficult to get along with people, but that it has to be intentional, like a marriage, and you're working on it, and you're trying to respect other people's dignity. And if you're me, you're trying not to talk too much, and you're trying to listen. So I am highly imperfect in that realm, but I see what has to be done in groups, and I value that experience.
Great, thank you.
So Auden, you didn't participate, at least in public, on the ASC Vision Committee process. However, the ski company was well represented by other people. I'm curious, what role did you play in that ASC Vision process? Were you acting as a consultant behind the scenes with the other ski company people, or could you describe what you did, and if you didn't do anything, what's your reasoning between not
Sure.
being involved in that?
Yeah. Yeah, so the way we work is we have a team and people are representing certain issues, but then we meet weekly and talk about those issues. And so you have a range of people in the room who are providing input, and I'm there providing input. So I was very much involved in conversations around what aircraft will come in and why, and what would be the justification or not. So, I was highly, highly involved in those conversations, but I wasn't the public face of it. And I'm not going to be, we have to pick our battles in terms of each of us having our time allocation. So that's how it works.
Okay, and if you do get picked on to be on this committee, are you going to be representing yourself, or would you see yourself as representing the ski company in some sense?
I think, to be fair, I do work for Aspen Skiing Company, and so it wouldn't be right of me to say I'm not entirely representing Aspen Skiing Company, but I think the role here is to represent the best interests of the community. And so I'd be here as a citizen, but also an employee of the corporation that employs 4,000 people here. So I think that's a relevant voice. But, my agenda isn't an Aspen Skiing Company agenda in all things, and that plays out internally within the company. My role there is often to say, wait a minute, what are you doing? And why? And if I agree, fine, but I can dissent internally as well, and that's part of the job. So I think this is about the community, but my work is also about the community at Aspen Skiing Company.
Okay, thanks for that perception.
Yeah.
All right, and I have a question. So I guess I'll just say something I wrestle with, and I'm curious what you think about this, is that the county runs a public airport of which 80 to 90% of the service is private clientele. And, I sort of wonder if there's an imbalance or an inequity there, or if I'm thinking about that incorrectly. And I guess I wonder, what do you think about when you sort of see the function of the government owning this airport and actually who uses it?
Yeah, I think that there is inequity, and I think the challenge is, how do you push on that? And this is not my expertise, but what would you do about that? In the past, Aspen Skiing Company and people in the county, including CORE, have said one way to address inequity is tax policy. And if in a perfect world you would tax aviation carbon, and then you could use the money, the revenue from that disproportionate chunk of private or general aviation to address inequity, to address climate, and so forth. That's an incredibly tough nut to crack because of FAA rules. But I think in the United States, maybe that can change, and maybe Aspen has a role in pushing national change that enables us to do that at the airport. So that's really interesting to me. I will say I've hit a brick wall on that, but I think that is a more likely path toward addressing that issue than regulating the number of flights that come in that I don't even know if you can do.
I appreciate that. I think about that topic a lot. Other questions for Auden here? We're at time.
I think we covered snowmaking and the airport, so I think we're pretty
Yeah,
good.
but
Any
snowmaking
final
was not
Thoughts
on
you're
the
going to
plan.
offer?
No, I just reiterate that this is a shining city on the hill opportunity. Do it right in a groundbreaking, bleeding edge way, and the rest of the world will notice. And perhaps you could accelerate change faster through what we do here. So it's a great, fun, exciting opportunity for the county. And I know you're going to crush it because the common ground recommendations, the thing I noted about them is there was pretty good agreement on a lot of things like carbon reduction, like 0.8% growth, which obviously is aspirational, but there's a lot of agreement, and it was a very progressive document. So you have that already, so I'm optimistic.
Great.
Thank you.
Great to
All
hear
right,
from an
great to see you.
optimist.
Thanks
Hey,
for
thank you.
coming
I'm
It was
gonna
great to
leave.
see you. Oh, yeah, leave those
Yeah.
for us. Here, just give them to me or Greg, and we'll pass them around. Great, thank you for bringing those.
Okay,
Greg.
thanks for the opportunity, everybody.
Appreciate it.
All right, folks, we doing okay? We will have a bit of a lengthier break after our interview with
Great,
Rich.
after Rich,
So
great.
if
Yeah.
everyone's ready to
Let's
keep
go ahead
going,
and
we can keep
See
going.
Rich here.
All right, Rich, come on up. We'll start a little early if you're ready.
Hello, commissioners.
Hi.
All right, look at this.
I have to undo what everything Auden did.
He's giving out bribes. What do you have for us?
Yeah, actually, I don't have a sustainability report to give out.
Cloud9 gift certificates? Come on.
Whatever you guys have, let me know.
I'll respectfully decline, but thank you.
I'm gonna put this away for lunchtime reading.
Yeah. All right, I'm looking at my colleagues. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Rich, welcome. So thank you so much for applying, and we appreciate you coming in today. It's nice to see people in person. So I've been setting we have a 15-minute time slot. We can run over, but I'm setting a 13-minute timer just to keep us honest and have a 2-minute warning there. And we'll do a round robin here, and each of us is kicking off each round, and so we're up to Francie to start us off whenever she's ready.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi, Francie. I think I don't know if I've ever actually met you in person. I've certainly seen you on the meetings over the years. I'm Rich Berkeley.
I guess I would ask, again, about general aviation, because I want to think about the fact that we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, who knows how much by the time we're done. And the airport primarily serves general aviation. I mean, obviously, we have people who come and go on commercial airlines and stuff, but our enplanements are predominantly GA. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the fact that we're going to be using all this taxpayer money to support the arrival and departures of very few wealthy people.
Okay. So, and I hope you know that I did serve on the Envisioning Committee, and so I was on the experience group, but we spent a lot of time on both sides. For this group and for the board, Auden referenced the Common Ground document that I hope you guys are all very familiar with, because I certainly spent enough time on it before we presented it to you at the Institute. And in there, you have to separate what we can accomplish as a county versus what the FAA will allow. And that was the number one kind of takeaway, that there's a lot that our hands are, that we cannot adjust with policy. So that's taking that aside then, but making it easy for commercial is probably the easiest way to level that, and that's hopefully what we're doing with some of with the Common Ground recommendations, the 15 points that are in that document.
Okay.
So, but yeah, safety was one that came up, and safety is an FAA, and then obviously airport design is FAA, and then commercial regulation versus GA is FAA.
And so would you consider the terminal reconstruction and improvements benefiting the commercial rather than GA then?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had two, overriding kind of themes for me were flexibility for the future, which is the unknowns that are going to come forward, and then the guest experience. And the guest experience from an airport perspective, I'm actually one of the few that was very comfortable with the way the guest experience is currently. It's not great, but it's still fitting in with your overall experience at airports. I was much more concerned with the employee experience. We certainly need to upgrade the employee workspace at the airport. And then the egress was my other one. And I am a huge fan of RAFTA and incorporating RAFTA more seamlessly into getting into town, and that also involves traffic. So I am one of the few people that probably boards an international flight, taking the bus from my house. I'm lucky enough, I live here, but I think our airport is an incredible asset for the community and for the people that live here.
Yeah, I can't really imagine why people down Valley would drive and park at the airport when they can just get on the bus and get off the bus and not pay airport fees. You know?
And there's that, but there's also, it's just not intuitive. And if, for instance, if RAP actually pulled in and picked up at the curb where we do the pickup and drop off, that might change. That simple change could improve. And we're not asking for 100% or absolutes. I'm just saying, what if you shifted 30% of the traffic to bus, free bus that goes right into town every 7 minutes? That to me those are the kinds of things that fairly pragmatic. I wasn't as aspirational as what I heard Auden just a little bit that he did. These are on the ground recommendations that we had come through the process, through the 47 meetings that we did in the last 2 years.
Only 47?
It was, no, I saw it in the document. I just read it. I was like, oh, wow, 47. I don't think I attended all of them, but it was a lot. I mean, it was thoroughly vetted, at almost every aspect of it. And a pretty comprehensive group.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You good?
I hope that helps a little.
perfect.
Yeah.
Patty?
Yeah, I've already heard you mention some things you think are a priority, but if you had to pick one issue of greatest priority, of your greatest concern and interest, what would that be?
Flexibility.
That's a
And
key
I'm
word.
always impressed at how little I know about the future. And I mean, the classic, I do strategic planning, and we spend a lot of time on threats. And I never came up with a pandemic as a threat, and no one did. That would just be one example. I think you guys are dealing with it with short-term rental. 10 years ago, we didn't. In fact, I think we were actually encouraging short-term rental. Hotbeds was the big. Now, short-term rental is a crisis. We don't know. I don't know what the changes will be in aviation, and I'm not an expert there. And Amory and others have opinions on it, but I do know that it's going to be something that the more flexibility we build into it, the better off we probably are to adapt to. Hopefully, environmental improvements in aircraft design, the ability to land, fewer passenger, increase your efficiency on per passenger mile, cost of, carbon, those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I've always known you as kind of a numbers guy. And so for numbers guys, they don't usually think about flexibility. It's usually columns. And so I like seeing that side of you, Rich.
I hope I'm a pragmatist.
No, you're flexible.
I have to be flexible, yes.
Thank you.
All right, Greg, up to you.
Yeah, great. Boy, Rich, thank you. Great answers, and I'm trying to think, how do I tune a question for you? You've been here a long time. You're a huge part of the community. So I guess the question I have, and also you're being part of the ski world, how do you look at the identity of our community? How does the ski world integrate with the rest of what happens in this community? And what makes us unique, and how does transportation play a role in that? I'm thinking some people have come in and talked about our place in the global, we're the shining city. We could set an example. Others are saying, well, we just need to figure out how to integrate so we're serving as many people as possible. How would you approach this? Like, where do you stand? In other words,
For airport? Sure. Yes, well, I stand 100% behind the Common Ground document. ADG 3, if that's the fundamental component to it, that's point 13, and I certainly support going to an ADG-free plan. For our community, I am a firm believer that our history and our geographic location are our competitive advantages, and that has driven quite a bit of it. Skiing is certainly a big component of that currently, and we do what we can to support the skiing. Competitively, worldwide, there is no ski resort, except for maybe Courchevel, but I wouldn't put that in the same category, that has an airport so close to skiing. That's one component to it, but on a personal level, I use the airport pretty frequently, like I think most of us do. And when weather permits, it's the most convenient and biggest asset for the community, I think, for transport. You can get into the FAA system and the TSA system off your bike or on a bus, as I said, and then you're in. And so then it's a quick hop to Denver, and you can avoid all of that, or Houston, or any of these connections that you can make and travel worldwide. So there, competitive advantage certainly, and that's just one of the many components. We always joke, Aspen may not do anything best, but we're top 3 in everything, is kind of how I always look at it. We might argue that we do life, the nightlife the best overall, but we fire on every cylinder, and this is one critical component to our engine.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, how you doing, Rich?
Doing great.
I'll ask you a similar question that I asked Auden. Would you feel that you would be representing yourself, or would you be representing the ski company if you're picked to be on the committee?
Yeah, and I saw that on a few other, Deb Braun got the same question. I have a real hard time separating my role in the ski company with my role in the community. So I'll be very frank there, and I hope that I'm representing both. But I can't say I'm not SkiCo, and I can't say I'm not a person that lives here. So if that makes sense, it's we are all kind of integrated, and that is one of the things that is part of this community. I see Kelly at the Historical Society meetings, and then I go to the next meeting, which could be art, and then we eat at Losteria's closing night, and then I will hopefully be skiing here in 2 weeks. So it's kind of integrated, but both, if that makes sense. I certainly hang with a subset of the community that doesn't work here and travels every week in and out. So there's quite a few people that do that, and they're locals just like us, but work in different cities and use the airport on a daily, weekly basis kind of thing. And that's also, I think, unique for Aspen. I don't know of any other ski resorts. I don't know Vail as well, the community there, but that people that live here, ski here, are daily skiers, but also have jobs elsewhere. So and that the airport affords that the ability to do that. So it's been 33 years, Steve. I worked with your dad.
Okay, so I see it. We are trying to get diversity on this board, and
Yeah.
and I would think that you would be looking at the aviation and airport issues through the lens of having worked for the ski company and in the ski industry for so long,
Yeah,
as well as just being a resident here.
I would argue the opposite. Let's say it's 50-50. I would say I would give myself 3 to 5% as a person, as a community member versus SkiCo. My last 3 trips have all been dropping kids off at college.
Oh, gosh.
And so the ability to fly in and out of Aspen and to connect, in this case, Los Angeles and New York, and when everything's working, which is primarily weather-based, it is the most convenient trip that you can make. You can be in Los Angeles in 90 minutes, where my daughter goes to school, and back home that night if you wanted. So, it's equal. I am both. I know we talked about growth, and there's a concern that airport is a driver of growth. I think in the Common Ground document, we know that it's not a single driver. It's like everything else, it's holistic. But I also, on other groups that I serve for the county, have spent a lot of time at the airport, and there's not much capacity growth. On an average day, it's amazing. And I know it's GA, so Francie, there's no question that a lot of those jets are not commercial, but there's also 35 commercial flights a day, and you start doing the math. I think on our last census, we were much less than 0.8% growth in Pickens County. I know that our neighboring counties don't share that, so we're seeing a lot of the effects of Garfield and Eagle. So we can't operate in an island here, but Pickens County certainly has done a good job of slowing growth to less than 0.8.
Before the pandemic.
Before the pandemic, well,
Okay,
it certainly wasn't building though. It's just now occupancy. Yeah, there's no question. Yeah. And I freely admit I'm one of the more spoiled ones. I'm commuting by bike even today. I rode, and I will probably have another week on a bike depending on how weather goes. And so I can avoid quite a bit of it, but I do see it and I do feel it. And obviously housing is our #1 issue this year.
Yeah.
So, from the SkiCo side.
Okay, thanks, Rich.
Yeah. No, it's
All right, Rich, thanks. Yeah, it's nice to see you. I know when I'm able to walk to the airport from Burlingame, and it always feels so luxurious.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's,
Like walk, pick up a sandwich, cross the street, get on the plane. Like it's pretty amazing. I do wonder, do you think there are any issues or kind of areas of interest for you that, you know, the county should be really bold on at the airport that maybe, you know, we've not been as aggressive or visionary that we could be?
so I'll default to my committee, which is customer experience. I think that's where we have the single biggest area to make an influence, changes. So much of your design is going to be driven by the standards for the FAA for ADG3. So that's you can influence certain things there. Environmental issues, I am probably the least optimistic for a real sustainable environmental change for aviation, with the exception of passenger mile, fuel efficiency per passenger mile is probably your single biggest opportunity. Then there's biofuels. So I was at the Atlantic Aviation meeting. My son actually interned for Atlantic Aviation in their biofuels division. There's progress there, but it's going to be a while before you're really flying on a renewable fuel. So your opportunities then are ground-based or customer experience. I think if you can take anyone out of a traffic jam this morning, if you arrived at 8 o'clock from anywhere and had to get back into Aspen, you've got a challenge. And RAFTA to me is the solution, the rubber tire system. So, but yeah, it's a holistic issue. So what you can experience. So that's the terminal design. It's terminal placement, it's transportation, it's arrival experience, some aesthetic. We spent a lot of time talking about covered off-ramps versus the current stairs. I personally am a big fan of open air, and you walk out and you get hit with the thing. But I also understand that, there's ice and there's certain operational logistics that go along with that. And then also people that are mobility handicapped have a challenge with that as well. So I respect all those, but those are the kinds of things that the county commissioners really have a lot of influence on.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, is there a last urgent question from anybody? Otherwise, Rich, we welcome you to have any final thoughts for our consideration.
No, I share Auden's statement that it's a super exciting project, and I look forward to the process, and I think that you guys you have your challenges, but certainly huge opportunities.
Cool.
In addition to creating the advisory board committee, we are also going to be looking at, I think, as the process moves on, the possibility and probability of setting up in little subcommittees to address really specific things. So I think we're going to hopefully provide opportunities for more than just the appointed 7 and 2 alternates as we move forward. So just to let you know that there's going to be opportunities to be involved in this exciting adventure we're starting on.
Yeah, no, given the list that you have, I come in contact with those people, so there's still ways that you can at least stay abreast of what's going on. And I actually freely admit I didn't probably read it as clearly, but I was like, monthly meetings? Oh man, I don't know if I'm. So it goes whatever
starting
direction
off,
it goes.
who knows? It could be weekly. Just to let you know, we haven't decided that yet.
Patty, I will update you in the produce section. That's where I usually like to do most of my meetings.
That's where Rich and I run into each other.
No, it's all good, and you have a really good list. And I think it's a pretty good balanced list, so whichever direction you go, I completely support.
And Rich was my niece's first roommate when she moved to town way back, so it's kind of fun to see how Rich is, how we growed him up around here.
Yeah, thanks for your mentorship.
We're going to create a job where it's like 6 degrees of separation of Patty Clapper.
I don't think it's going to happen. It's a weird
So,
thing.
Rich,
3
you
degrees of
mentioned the open
separation.
air, and I want to tell the story at least once today. One of my most memorable plane trips was landing in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. And you walk down the stairs actually to get on the tarmac, and you walk across and you feel the air and the humidity, and you're looking at all this lush tropical vegetation. You walk in, they don't even have opening and closing doors on the terminal. The terminal's an open air kind of terminal, and they hand you a little glass with rum in it when you walk in the door. It was like the most memorable flight I ever took. First time I landed there, I'll never ever forget that. First impression when somebody lands in Aspen, I think, is important.
Yeah, I you nailed it. So it's very memorable, and I think we can create a very memorable arrival experience as well.
Yeah, and my son did that getting off a plane here. He came out and stood at the top of the stairs, and he was a little guy, and he looked around and he goes, took a deep breath, he goes, "It smells so good to be home." And I wasn't sure if he was talking about the clean air or the jet fuel. So whatever it was, it made him feel like he was home, so.
So were you the manager at the Highlands when my son Rio was on ski instructor there?
Yeah, we worked over. Yeah, we crossed. So yes,
Yeah.
well, let's see. I was manager. Ski school for a couple years, and then operations. So, but yes, I worked with Rio.
We've followed Rich through his turns and twists with the ski company for many years.
Well, thank you guys so much for the
It's
opportunity.
good to see you. I can't
Cheers.
believe your
Thank you,
daughter's in
Rich.
college.
Thanks for all the work you do.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
Rich.
Good luck with the process.
Thank you. All right, folks, so we have a break
Thanks, Rich.
until our next interview is scheduled for 11 o'clock. I'll just ask everybody to come back about a minute or two before
Perfect.
11 so we can get settled in. All right, and Grassroots, thanks. We'll have a bit of a break for the next 15 minutes.
Right.
Thank you.
Where's she at school?
Occidental.
Oh, really? Great school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
I think you're right.
Visit with Mirta. She came to the house and we had a really good time. She hadn't been out there, I don't think, since it was finished. Yeah. It was really fun to have her. She was awesome with my granddaughter. I don't know if she told you, but I had given my granddaughter, Sierra's daughter, a subscription to this thing called Well Science. So she gets like 2 kits every month with 3 or 4 science experiments in it. So she really wanted to do the science experiment, but I was also preparing for the real sub group dinner that night, so she pretty much did the whole science experiment by herself. She's 10. But Mirta was just totally in and out, she goes with those stuff, the food week, no. Everything. Sugar and something light. Oh, that's so nice of you, Rich. Thank you. So very. Well, it was, Patty was, I think, setting Rich up for the realization that we have 3 SKICO people applying. Yeah, David's not SKICO anymore. Two young people. I thought Auden was 46. I was surprised to hear he was 51. Seems pretty young.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Pickens County Board of County Commissioners work session on November 12th, where we are interviewing candidates for our Airport Advisory Board, which we are convening for the very first time. And so Howie Mallory is here with us for our next interview. And Howie, what we've been doing, we have 15 minutes allotted for every candidate. I'll set a 13-minute timer just to give us a bit of a 2-minute warming to wrap things up. And we'll do a round robin with commissioners and look forward to hearing from you. So who are we up to, Patty?
Me.
All right, Patty, kick us off.
Hi, Howie.
Do I get to make an opening statement, or
Well,
If you'd like
yeah,
to.
how do you prefer?
I think that would be great, if
Yeah.
it's okay with Kelly.
Of course, yes, please do so.
Very briefly, thanks for inviting me in today. I'd like to make a brief statement, then gladly try to answer some questions. The proximity of Sardi Field to Aspen and Snowmass provides our tourist-based economy a huge benefit and advantage for our summer and winter seasons, as well as, of course, similar benefits for valley-wide residents, second homeowners, and general visitors. And this advantage is no accident, but rather the result of successive upgrades, renovations, modernizations of the terminal and runway facilities since tarmac was first paved in the late 1940s. Those changes were the result of local citizens' efforts to meet a need and to look forward to the importance of air travel to the community. ASE, or Aspen, is an organic entity that helps meet the economic, cultural, and social needs of the communities up and down the valley. What lies before us is a continuation of that process. It's no small task, but it's our local responsibility, along with the partnering with the FAA, to handle this challenge. Guiding the decisions to incorporate the best new iterations of air travel while holding fast to our local community values, as noted in the ASC Vision Community Values Summary, will be a formidable responsibility for you, the BOCC. It would be an honor for me to be part of the Aspen Airport Advisory Committee to help you and the community on this path forward.
Thank you.
That's it.
All right, wonderful, thank you. And Patty,
Now-
we'll turn to you to
I'm
start.
going to
Any
kind of give
questions?
you what either could be a ending or a beginning question. Out of, there's a lot of issues of importance at the airport what we're looking at, and what we've been looking at for a couple of years now. But for you, what would be the issue of greatest priority, or an issue that you could focus on for your concerns, your interests?
I think the biggest challenge will be the third one of our community values is managing the emplanements, the 0.8%. I think it's an admirable and aspiration and goal, and I think it's really core to everybody's anxiety or uncertainty about the future, given that the fact that air travel has benefited Aspen so much in the past. And Aspen has grown as a community over the last 60 years. And it's really largely a function of volume of people coming in, using the benefits of air travel service. Having said that, that 0.8% really only refers to the commercial aviation, the scheduled commercial flights. The other 75% of the takeoffs and landings, the LTOs, really come from the general aviation use of our airport. If there's anything that comes up when I talk with friends and people about the future of the airport, it seems to always move over to how do you manage the large number of general aviation flights? And how can we make that compatible with our stated community values and goals?
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks, Howie. Greg?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk a lot about GA and the huge significant impact. I want to make sure we also just talk about local general aviation, because we actually still have an airport that has a lot of local pilots
Yes.
who fly little airplanes, or maybe they fly bigger ones, but they fly in and out of Aspen to either commute or for recreation or for their work, say like Bruce Gordon or others. We actually have a GA that's been vibrant and a wonderful part of the community for many years. So there's the large, big jets flying in constantly aspect to it, and then there's the small ones. I just like to make that distinction, because we kind of tend to group it all together.
Right.
A couple of questions I have would be, as a committee member, what do you think what would you need from us, the county, staff and BOCC, in order for this vision committee to succeed? I mean, you know, how could we be the best enabler of your committee?
That's a really good question. And what occurred to me looking at the bylaws of the advisory board, what seems to be a little bit confusing or missing in being effective going forward, occurred to me, is that you'll have the commissioners, and then we'll be reporting to you in some fashion as a result of our discussions amongst ourselves. But I think for us to be able to be most effective, there should be a dotted line or some sort of established connection with the airport enterprise operation itself, the airport manager, so that we can have that dialogue to understand more what he's doing, or that his organization is doing, along with an understanding that what kind of budget do we have to work with to be able to make our recommendations. I think what's been missing in this discussion, at least from my point of view, is we haven't really approached the cost and the management of the funding of all these, of the idea of the terminal and the runway and the other improvements at the airport. The community asked me about that. How are you going to pay for it all? And I think that has to be put forth to the public. And maybe that's one of the roles, though not stated in the bylaws specifically, but that's one of the roles that the advisory committee should be able to express to the community. So we're kind of a we're kind of a voice, an independent, but a spokes group, if you will, of some of these issues that the public raises questions, so that they can be approachable to us about getting answers. So we can be approachable. That's
Great, thanks. Can I get my second one?
Yeah, Greg, go ahead. There's time.
So Howie, you've been here a long time. You've been involved in so many committees. I think we tried to rattle them off during the last time you were in here. So the question is, what's important to our community, and how do you see, how are we going to define success for this airport, and what will be important for our community in the way of airport or air transportation in say in 20 years? Asking you to look into the crystal ball, as Rich points out, never really works. But
I asked myself that same question. What is success? Success is much more than just building a new terminal to handle the flow of visitors coming and going. I think success would be the acceptance by the community at some time at the point in the future that we managed to improve air service with adapted to the new equipment that's going to be made available to us, and hopefully that equipment, and we can set guidelines for it. It can meet the emissions and noise standards that will be flying in here, particularly over the residential areas. Success would be if we could improve the last mile from the airport to the destinations of where people are going. I think we'll be able to have better air service in the future, particularly with some of the newer aircraft coming in. We can bypass Denver and come directly to Aspen. But to me, it's really important. Ultimately, the public's going to judge us on how you get from the airport to your destination. And I know that's tangential to what you're charged with, but inevitably that's going to be coming up as a measurement, as a point of interest, as how successful we've been able to move people from the airport to their destinations.
Right. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Steve?
So Howie, you are I think the one applicant who is being interviewed who is a retired banker. You have a different understanding of financial issues than anyone else who is applying, which could be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess, but how would you see, well, then, the second point, you served on the technical working group in the ASC vision process.
Right.
So when you were looking at the technical aspects of what was being proposed at the airport, how did you balance that with your knowledge of finance, and how are we going to pay for this? Who is going to pay for the various parts of it?
Well, Steve, to be honest with you, I haven't been able to balance it because I really don't know where the numbers are. And I think that's a job that we would have to undertake relatively soon, to do some what we call it pro formas, some early kind of what if scenarios that we can talk knowledgeably about the costs that have to, the expenses that will have to be paid for, because that has an impact on the degree of capital improvements that would occur either on the runway or at the terminal itself. I understand that the FAA will be the largest funder of the airside improvements, but there's also, I understand, but it's never been totally clear to me or to anyone else, that the terminal itself will have local funding requirements to meet our values, meet our design expectations. So how's the community going to pay for that? And that's going to be kind of a give and take, I think, between what you like, what you like to eat and what you can really afford. And I think I'd be competent enough to help guide some of that discussion.
Yeah, and I would see perhaps a role for the Financial Advisory Board to give advice to the Airport Advisory Board on those matters of, the big financing questions.
Sure, and there's some perceptions out there that I think have to be dealt with. Some of which, and this goes back to a few of the 10 years ago, perhaps, when the idea of redoing the airport was coming up, and the question was asked, well, how are you going to fund it? How's the airport enterprise organization entity going to fund it? And one of the remarks was, well, they're just going to expand the rental car fleet and charge more. Well, that flies in the face of, I think, our values, as well as air quality standards and things of that sort. Even if they were all Teslas, it still wouldn't be accomplishing a goal of mitigating traffic impacts, that last mile problem.
Well, if Hertz is getting 100,000 Teslas, and maybe we can get about 2,000 of them here or something.
Well, we can, yeah.
There's still cars on the road.
You're in charge, but I don't know whether you get buy-in from the advisory board on that.
You good, Steve? All right. Howie, thanks for applying. Nice to see you. I'm wondering, what ways do you want this board and the commissioners to be bold and visionary regarding our airport?
Well, with respect to the facility itself, I'd like to have as a goal a be energy neutral, if you will, zero impact in terms of its operating as an entity and all of the other energy demands at the airport itself. Supporting the aircraft, those would operate with zero carbon impact, which is a target. With respect to the aircraft themselves, that's a real challenge, because we're largely dependent on the decisions coming out of the airlines. So I think we have some leverage to negotiate with them. It was talked about in the package that was sent out. The real vision, I think, would be the bold step would be trying to move people from the airport and their baggage more efficiently to their destination. Somehow, I'd like to envision, and someone suggested this to me. You think of Denver, you get off the airplane, and your bags are delivered basically a mile and a half away, and then you pick them up and you go on to your destination. Something like that, to me, would be a bold effort on our part to mitigate that congestion and delay that occurs when the planes land at the airport. For our committee to be successful in recommendation, I think we'd need to engage some very knowledgeable airport logistics and baggage handling experts that can help us, give us an idea of what we should zero in on.
Great, thank you.
And there's another thing that we have to keep in mind here. This is going to be a big capital, and not only a capital event, it's going to require a fairly large staff to run the airport. We're all now dealing with the dilemma of finding personnel to work in the airport. So if the airport operation could be as lean as possible, if we can do more with fewer people, to me that would be a huge success. However that metric's established. That way, because that'll reduce the pressure for housing for basically the 24 operations of the airport.
Thank you.
And that's not to recommend that we eliminate the curfew. No, that's not what I'm saying.
I know, I don't, that
Thank you
seems
for adding that.
a hard point, fast point. Francie, go ahead, and we'll wrap up here.
Yeah, so you're sort of from the family that's famous for the last mile, and I'm wondering what kinds of ideas you might have about not just getting people into Aspen and up to Snowmass, but, obviously down Valley they can ride the bus and have to walk over with their suitcase and stuff like that, but, which is not a big deal. But I'm wondering if you have any ideas about how to streamline the transportation out of and into the airport, but also how to do it so it doesn't increase the traffic on the road and the emissions and all of that.
Well, so it would have to be somewhat of a cultural change, I think. We're so accustomed to people taking their cars to the airport and being picked up by individuals and families that we would have to demonstrate that using the public transportation to nodes might be more efficient for getting people, picking them up when they land. That's not going to basically apply to, I would say, Snowmass and Down Valley arrivals, but in Aspen, that the airport could undertake a central, kind of an airport logistics center in town itself, where bags could be brought into town and people pick them up there.
Or to their hotels.
Or to their hotels. I mean, all of that with the right kind of labeling and barcoding, all of that could be done. It's done in other communities. It's done in Switzerland pretty much nationwide. So I think there's something, we don't have to reinvent the wheel in some of this. We can engage with the experts who can come and give us some help on it. It may be rough at the outset, but if we're patient and we persevere, I think it's doable. If we can do 50% or 25% improvement, then that's a massive increase. That's a massive benefit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're right at time here. Any last thoughts for us, Howie?
No, thank you for, let me put my glasses back. I may have one other note I want to talk about. I did want to make one other final comment with respect to the values and how you implement that and carry it out for the community. I look at one of our fellow western cities, Bozeman, Montana. Bozeman was sort of like Grand Junction, and they have similar strong community values, and they want to benefit of take advantage of the strong tourist market oriented around Yellowstone. And what they decided to do, everything I said about values and everything that's written in here about values, they basically say the same thing. But their outcome was a half-mile-long terminal with 10 or more gates built in a Yellowstone Lodge sort of style, a very massive structure. So what I'm getting at is that I think it's really important for us to make our decisions based on the context of where we are and relative to the history of here, and not misread some of these comments to encourage a much more out-of-scale facility in operation, particularly the facility. I think the facility, has to be kept at appropriate scale and context to the landscape. So, thanks.
It's interesting you mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. That you mentioned the Bozeman Airport. I have to say that's been one of my best airport experiences anywhere.
Well, that's good.
Well, I don't remember the length of it, but I do remember the core of it with that big bar upstairs and the geese sculptures, and you could go upstairs and just sit in a leather chair in front of the fire and wait for your flight, and it was so personal and warm compared to most airports.
I think it's a really good point, and we're going to have to deal with the dwell time issue because of flights are being canceled because of weather and other. So, I just personally would not encourage us to build a temple for people,
get that.
or a conference center for people to stay in the airport. It should be a pleasant place to come in, pass through, and get on to what you're here for. Yeah, and it is a good bar. You're right.
Thanks, Howie.
Thank you.
Nice
I
to
was
see
gonna
you.
say, I kind of miss you being in France, drinking a glass of nice French wine while you're attending the meeting, but we can work on that for the future.
Oh, could I have done that today?
No, we might have to wait till afternoon.
You could try.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
See you, Howie.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
All right, we just lost Richard.
Everybody just
He
stepped
probably
out
saw
behind.
that
A
there's
little
a,
bit late.
So there was a fire at Limelight?
I think he probably saw that there's a transition.
Okay, let's just take a 2-minute break here, and we'll let Richard come back and get settled in. 2 minutes.
You know, they kind of have a code. One of them
Rick.
is.
Okay, thank you.
For medical response. Medical response alarm, I think, is shorter. They didn't used to sound the alarm.
I do that at home all the time. So, yeah. All right, and we're not live yet, so let us go back and, our board members ready? Rick, are
Yeah.
you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right, grassroots, can you count us down, please?
Rich brought that. He's so adorable.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're moving on to the second to last applicant for our Airport Advisory Board, Rick Heedy. Nice to see you, thank you. So you listened in on the last one, and I'll go ahead. I will set a timer for 13 minutes, but we will ask questions, give everyone the opportunity to have their questions answered. And with that, gosh, who are we up to?
I think
Greg
we're
again.
back to Greg.
Back to Greg. Okay. You are in the hole.
All right, welcome, Rick. Great to see you. Glad you're here. Okay. I'm looking at my list of questions to see what would I want to ask
Oh,
you.
you're in for it.
I know.
Bottom of the barrel, difficult questions.
Yeah.
Well, the big question, of course, is how do you maintain a community, a sense of community that we've all come to appreciate, and change our airport significantly to where it could actually help. It could make a huge impact on a cultural shift here. How do we walk that fine line, and where does your specific expertise come in on this?
Well, I think it's important to ground ourselves in the cultural and environmental and social values that we embody in Aspen and in Pitkin County. I think we have had an emphasis and a leading role in terms of environmental programs, with buildings, with transportation. And now we're looking at the airport potential expansion. And I think having a connection to the community is important. Public input to the BOCC, to the Airport Advisory Board itself, and having board members that have the capacity to reach out and seek public input. I think it's pretty clear from the airport vision process that the cultural community values embody not only a new terminal that I think we all agree is needed in short order, will need to be environmentally responsible, will need to be comfortable, not right-sized, not oversized,
and serve an aviation industry, both GA and commercial, in ways that embody climate responsibility, in my view, which is my particular focus. I proposed originally the 30% reduction by 2030 in carbon emissions, which is not going to be easy to achieve, and broader in terms of air pollution and noise and community values that want to protect and enhance the flying experience, both for locals and for visitors.
Thank you. There's a lot there. I'm trying to absorb it.
Turn your mic on, please, Greg.
Oh,
Thank you.
Sorry, mic on. Thank you. That's enough for me for now.
So Rick, you are probably the world's renowned expert on the carbon footprint of the Aspen-Picking County Airport. You know more about that. You make your whole living off of doing studies such as the one you did here. So we really know your position on that. But then what would be your number two thing? I would think that trying to get more energy efficiency and would be one of your main goals. But then what would be your second most important thing that you see the committee working on and accomplishing?
I'm not an aviation safety expert. That obviously comes first for the whole flying public. So that wouldn't be my expertise. I think the second one that is a hard nut to crack is what Howie referred to in terms of the last mile delivery of persons and luggage to their end destination. I don't have a solution for that, but I think I have the technical background and the innovation to help guide the board and the BOCC on options for reducing the efficiency and convenience of conveyance from the airport to the final destination.
Okay.
And I know it's a very difficult thing to do. We've wrestled with transportation issues for decades here. And the city has an objective of reducing traffic. We've got an excellent bus system. But I don't think we've solved the nut of how to integrate that with the airport and basically the hundreds of thousands of people coming into the airport on an annual basis. I think perhaps a tax on single-use vehicles coming and going to the airport as a possibility. And I know that John Peacock, to shift the subject a little bit, looked into the possibility of charging a fuel rate, a carbon tax basically, on the fuel sold at the airport in order to make the customers and the buyers of jet fuel and avgas aware not only of the environmental consequences, but also help fund the projects to reach carbon reductions. I don't know if that's legally permissible by the FAA, but I know it's an issue we'll probably look into.
When you personally fly places, which you probably have flown a lot, to meet with clients and go to conferences and whatnot, are you one of the people who flies out of the Aspen airport, or are you one of the people who drives to DIA in a car and flies from there?
I prefer to fly. Even with the CRJ 700s, it costs me, in terms of my carbon emissions, about half as many pounds of carbon to fly to Denver as to drive the average vehicle to Denver and then fly from there. So I prefer to fly. For the convenience as well.
Okay.
But I do take the bus to the airport.
Thank you, Rick.
That should have been our opener question, is how do you get to the airport from your house? Well, nice to meet you.
Hi,
and I
Kelly.
really
We haven't
was-
met. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Cheers. I really enjoyed reading your application and resume. And I guess one of the questions I've been asking people is related to how bold should we be? Where are we sitting on our hands? Where would you like to see us be very bold and visionary for the future of the airport?
My vision in terms of climate responsibility really is that we aim for not only a net zero complete aviation experience in and out of Aspen, not just at the airport, not the terminal itself, not the auxiliary power units or the plows that have to operate here, but the whole aviation community flying in and out of here to be net zero by 2050, and an interim goal of 30% reduction by 2030. But we have to be able to measure that accurately in order to declare success. And that's not currently being done with the current protocol of estimating emissions based on just jet fuel sales. Because we know there are a lot of particularly general aviation aircraft that fly in here, drop off passengers and fly somewhere else and don't buy any fuel. So we're missing that whole segment of emissions that we should capture. And in terms of net zero, in terms of better technology within 30 years, the potential of electric planes, hydrogen planes, other new technology will certainly help, as will sustainable aviation fuel. The closest refinery for that is Los Angeles at this point, but hopefully in the next few years that will come close enough to be able to require that the Aspen Airport buy sustainable aviation fuel. It's still blended with fossil fuel, Jet A, but it's a step in the right direction. And the final point is that I'd like to see a lot more zero than net. We shouldn't be buying our way out of this problem by fostering tree growth in the Amazon. As valuable as that is, we need to focus first and foremost on how do we reach zero with less net. That means carbon negative terminal associated with potential for solar power on lands owned by Pitkin County to supply electricity to the terminal as well as airport lighting. And it also focuses carefully on what kind of aircraft and distances and routes flown by the aircraft that land in Aspen.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It's detailed.
Well, that was
Francie.
similar to my question, and very nice to meet you, Rick.
Hi, Francie. Nice to meet you.
Mine is, as a futurist, not what do you see aspirationally, but what do you see realistically in our future in the next 10 and 20 years?
Realistically, that Aspen aviation and air travel to Aspen is likely to grow. I support the initiative for modest growth over time. It's likely that we will have larger aircraft replacing, for example, the Airbus, potentially the Mitsubishi, although that development is on hold. There are new aircraft coming online that will serve Aspen. Whether that requires greater airport and taxiway separation, I think is something that we will have to debate and research. So I do see it likely that we will have somewhat larger aircraft coming in and serving this airport, which might, I hope, mean fewer flights. Hopefully means less noise, because the new aircraft will be quieter, and we'll have reliable service from many destinations around the country.
And on the ground?
I hope that we will be able to continue monitoring and being innovative in terms of ground transportation. Aside from the airport issue, obviously there are lots of workers who come up to service Aspen's hotels and private residences that live in Rifle and beyond and drive up here on a daily basis. So I think that's a very difficult problem to solve, but hopefully through innovative thinking we'll be able to supply Aspen's labor needs less carbon intensively.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Francie.
Yeah,
Patty?
so Steve made me have to think out of the box, since he kind of used my question and expanded it a little differently. So, in thinking out of the box, the makeup of this committee, our hope will be a very diverse demographics. And you seem to have a very calm demeanor. So how do you feel that you will play a role in a group that's going to be very diverse, and hopefully very passionate about their diversities?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think you're going to fit in with a working group like that? Because the issues at the airport for the advisory committee are going to be very broad. They're not necessarily going to be just focused on the new terminal or the runway. I mean, those will be issues first and foremost. But a lot of the issues will be general operating issues of the airport. So how do you feel the role that you might be able to play in that?
I listen well. I think I have a good capacity to reach out for advice from the public and invite them in to advise us as a board on how they feel. I think that's important to keep the public informed about our progress and our deliberations. And I think I have an easy capacity to reach out to the BOCC individually or collectively to seek help on certain critical issues that I think we're discussing.
Great.
I think the communication between the board and the advisory board is important. We're not operating in isolation.
Great, thanks. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, Rick. We have time for more questions. We have about a couple more minutes. Any others?
Sure, I'd just say, you travel a lot, you've been focused on carbon emissions and carbon emitters. Where could we look outside our community for, insight and inspiration, perhaps with other airports or other systems that are working well? How are they doing it elsewhere you've been or that you know about that might help inform us as we're looking at, design, architecture,
2-minute warning.
systems planning?
Right.
Tell us about
There are a number of initiatives between airlines and study groups. Corsia, for example, I don't remember what that acronym stands for, but the industry is very concerned about its not only its public image, but its technical capacity to foster sustainable aviation. We know that's a growing issue around the world. In terms of airport operations, there are airports that are pushing sustainable aviation fuel, like the airport in Oslo, for example, has basically demanded that a certain percentage of the fuel will be sold as sustainable aviation fuel and has set up a program to use forestry waste to generate that sustainable fuel. The Clean Air Board in California, those regulations have caused the construction of a refinery to provide sustainable aviation fuel for both Los Angeles, LAX, as well as SFO by way of pipeline. I don't think that option is available to us in terms of pipelining 7 million gallons of jet fuel into the Aspen Airport, but hopefully there'll be a refinery in Denver before too long, perhaps with our encouragement, so that we can access sustainable aviation fuel sooner rather than later. And we know that aircraft efficiency is improving. On the other hand, based on the metric that we use, gallons sold at the airport, it might lead, if we have longer routes and larger aircraft, to less fuel being bought at the Aspen Airport. On the other hand, it could be the other way around, that the longer routes will require those larger aircraft to buy more fuel at the Aspen Airport, since they don't come with enough fuel for the round trip. So that needs to be sorted out.
Thank you, Rick. Any last one? Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm assuming then you don't see the imminence of electric airplanes?
The power density of batteries is about 1% as much as the power density of a gallon of jet fuel.
Is that right?
That's about 0.46 megajoules per kilogram, I think, for a battery. And about 46 megajoules per kilogram. Sorry to be metric, but that's how it comes for gasoline.
Mm-hmm.
Developments
not even to
are
Denver?
certainly coming, and smaller aircrafts will be the first ones to fly electric. But larger aircraft, I think, will take a long, long time. Perhaps a better option is to fly with chemical fuel on board and generate electricity on board as opposed to carrying batteries.
So a hybrid kind of. Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Francie.
Thank you.
All right, Rick, any last final thoughts for us?
I think Aspen and Pitkin County has an amazing opportunity to be a highly visible leader in not only local operations, but in terms of encouraging aviation efficiency. And I hope that happens not only in terms of its terminal being exemplary, but also the whole concept of aviation itself. I think we can step forward and lead the world in some degree in that regard.
Cool. Thank you. It was so nice to meet you.
Thanks, Rick.
Likewise.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Rick.
everyone.
We'll see you.
All right.
Thank you, Patty.
All right, David Perry, you have the lucky role of being our last applicant of the group.
15 people you've been through. I can't
Yeah, yeah, and it's all
Hi,
been
Patty.
great.
I know. I was AWOL for a bit.
I know we can talk about that in a moment.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a mutual friend down there, but I'll bring it up later.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, welcome. So, you know, we have time. We've slotted 15 minutes. I will set a timer just so we have a bit of a 2-minute warning and keep everybody on track.
Okay.
And I will turn it to Steve Child, who I think is kicking us off for this last interview.
Hey, Steve.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
How are you doing in your new career, not working for the ski company?
Yeah, I feel like a free man. I really, it's yeah, it's interesting. It was a little over 4.5 years ago, about 4.5 years ago, that I left Aspen Skiing Company and went to start up Altera as the founding president and chief operating officer, and that was a heck of a ride. I got to tell you, it's Altera was Denver based, so my wife and I went to Denver. We kept our home in Woody Creek and rented it, and I was on a plane most of the time. I wasn't really in Denver, and but had a really, really great experience building that company, building Altera. And after 4 years, it was time for me to step down and start up a consulting company. And we're back here in the valley, in Woody Creek, in our home again, and living in the flight path, as we have since 2005. And I feel really good. This has always been home, and the experiment of living in Denver for my wife and I was interesting. Not that Denver's a bad city. It's a very good city, but we're not city folk. We belong here. And besides, we wanted to live in a place where our daughters would come and actually visit us, and Denver was not that place. So,
So
feels good.
living in Woody Creek and being really familiar with the whole aircraft, the airline industry here, what is your take on where we should go with the airport?
Well, that's the core question, isn't it? And if you don't mind, if I just take a couple of minutes to say, why I'm here, or why I've put my hat in the ring as a potential candidate here, and then I will get to that. First of all, we moved to the Valley in 2002. I was a senior executive at Aspen Skiing Company for 15 years. And during that time, Stay Aspen Snowmass, SAS, I was chairman of the board. And so Bill Tomsich reported to me for that period of time. And so I was very engaged in mostly the air service side, the commercial air service side. And it wasn't too long ago that United was basically the only carrier coming in here, and they were in a cash crunch. And we were looking at a retirement of the BA 146, and then we worked hard to attract and retain multiple carriers to come into Aspen Airport, and so I got to know a lot about air service, airlines, about the GA side as well, and a certain amount about airport operations, just from being exposed to it. So I really enjoyed that part of my work, and so when I stepped away to start Altera, I still was engaged, actually, with Steamboat, which was one of the resorts that we acquired, and Mammoth, California, for their air service. So I was still sort of engaged at a high level on air service issues. But, really, my return to the Valley is that I have a desire to give back to the community and to bring some business expertise and some experience. And I'll admit that I'm 4.5 years, not current, but I've followed it from afar. I've followed about the Vision Committee and all the really good work that was done in that regard. And so, what do I bring? Well, I'm independent of Aspen Skiing Company, number one. I want to share my knowledge and experience. I want to serve the board. I want to serve you. I want to be able to help bring a consensus recommendation to you And that's part of the skill that I think I have had over the years, is building a consensus, bringing people together, problem solving. I'm an optimist and I'm a positive person at heart, but I really like coming up with solutions for things and getting people to support those solutions. And I think I've proved that over and over again. One example on the environmental side was, at Altera, owning and operating 15 ski resorts and then partnering with up to 47 total resorts on the Icon Pass. I know that's not necessarily popular in town, the Icon Pass, but I did create it, so you can blame me. But the 4 big ski companies in the country, is Vail Resorts, Altera, there's Powder Corp, and Boyne Resorts. And I
Boeing
got
Resorts?
the leaders of, Boyne Resorts and Powder Corp. Together, those 4 companies own and operate about 85 of the ski resorts out of the 430 in this country. So I got the leaders of all 4 of those companies to come together and sign an environmental charter, which was a commitment to taking action on climate and the environment. And that was publicly released. I was actually ready to release just when COVID hit. It went on pause, and we released it in the spring. And it was a very definitive document meant to set a benchmark for the ski resort industry, to say we are committed to taking these actions on the environment and on climate. And so it was not easy bringing 4 competitors together, but to bring common ground between Vail Resorts and the other 3 other large ski companies was something I'm very proud of. So I'm here to try and build a consensus, bring my experience to the table, and assist in any way I can. Steve, to try and answer your question with the airport, it's it's a difficult one, right? It's just because any solution or solutions that you come up with are not going to be 100%, shared by everyone here. And this is why you all sit in these hot seats, right? To try and find the best possible solution. I really like that you're, pulling together an advisory board. I think it's a great idea. And to lean on, an independent body to advise you. I think that's very good. And with the airport, I think that we have, it's the economic lifeline of the community, right? The airport's essential. It's essential for support jobs, to support the tourism economy. It's essential for residents to come and go. It's really a part of the quality of life that we all enjoy here. And so it's such an important and visible centerpiece. And, and then there's tensions, right, around it. There's tensions around, the runway, taxiway separation and the air terminal and things like that. But I also really believe there are solutions here. And those solutions need to be based on the facts, and a lot of fact gathering's gone on, but not based on fear. Fear of change, fear of the future, fear of, large noisy 737s coming in as the only solution, which I don't believe is really going to happen to any great degree at all, right? So I think that, and I've advocated for this for some time since we saw the disappearance, or the start of the disappearance of the CRJ 700, and seeing that they were going out of service, and they continue to go out of service. And I know there's some really, some interesting, potentially good news on the horizon for regional aircraft to take the place of the CRJ. I have flown on the Airbus 220. It's a great plane. Air Canada flies them, and I flew to Toronto and back this past summer on that aircraft. It's a really beautiful aircraft. Would be, I think, ideal for this airport. There's the Embraer 175, not necessarily as ideal a solution, but it's a good aircraft too, and with the potential adjustments to that aircraft, maybe that's a viable alternative to come in here. So I'm hopeful that we'll maintain regional aircraft that are appropriately sized for this airport coming in here. Yes, some growth, but modest growth, not aggressive growth, because I don't think that commercial air service into Pickens County Airport is not what's going to drive growth in this valley. I think that there's other limiting factors on growth, but air service is not going to be the major one. So a few remarks anyway. to
Okay, thanks.
Start things off.
So you gave lots of answers. You probably answered everyone's question too.
Oh, hardly, I'm sure. Hardly.
Thank you for that in-depth look at the whole, the whole big picture here in the valley.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I've asked this of a couple, but not every applicant, but I'm curious as to your thoughts. We have an airport that's a publicly owned, community-owned airport that is mostly serving private service, just based on the proportions of GA traffic rather than commercial traffic. And I think about if that's an inequity that the community should wrestle with, and we should wrestle with, and the Airport Advisory Board should wrestle with. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that topic.
Yeah, it's an airport, so, the FAA has obviously certain laws and rules in place, and, to what extent we can control the amount of GA traffic in and out of Aspen Airport is really not fully in our hands, right? That said, the amount of GA, demand for GA obviously has increased pretty dramatically in recent years, and it spiked. It's like, when COVID hit, it was like a Saturn booster rocket on property values and demand for people that have access to GA aircraft to come to Aspen, right? So we've seen, experienced now the last year and a half, a real increase in demand. I don't believe that demand is going to, continue to put too much pressure on GA into Aspen. I also don't think it's going to slow down. Why? Because frankly, let's be honest, there's a wealth gap in this country. And there's more people making more money and have more access to GA aircraft. And so it's a reality that we have to live with. So if GAA is a reality that we have to live with and we have to support, and we're looking at numbers of flights in and out, which is a finite number of slots available, I think we just have to manage it. I would like to see GA people who fly GA to contribute to the environmental impact of their flights in certain ways. I would love to. I don't know how much of this may or may not have been explored, but how do we get an offset program for the carbon emissions that GA and commercial flights bring into Aspen, and make sure that we can clean up the 89,000 tons of carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere every year, and offset it in some creative ways.
Great, thank you.
I don't know if that answers your
It
question,
does, yes,
Kelly, or
thank
not.
you. Francie?
I don't have a question.
No? Oh, come on.
You've answered a lot of questions along the
Okay.
way, so,
Okay.
I'm good with what you've said.
I'm
Okay.
gonna take all your answers and all the information you've given, and I'm gonna focus it on one simple thing. For you and all your experience in the community, in the ski industry, and with, part of that with airlines and guest services, what is your priority issue at the airport, your issue of greatest concern? Take all that vast amount of knowledge you have and focus.
One priority. Well, I want to make light of the safety record of the airport is essential to keep, an impeccable safety record. I know it's been challenging over the past 40 years, but, and obviously the environmental ethic that this valley shares really strongly is a really important pillar. But I think those things are already well established, and supported. So I'm going to say it's the economic vitality and future-proofing the airport to maintain its role as the economic lifeline of the community. I would say that's going to be it. And to what extent you lean on the advisory board for fiduciary advice, I think I can bring that because all of my time in business has always had a fiduciary role. And looking at, the financial viability, but not just of the airport. The airport operates well, but it's of the economic drivers in the community and that they're being properly served and balanced.
I'm getting goosebumps. I don't know why, but it got chilly over here. But no, that really took all of the stuff that you kind of focused. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good. Thanks, man.
All right, other questions?
Well, let's see, it's my turn?
It can
Did I
be
ask you one
anyone's
yet?
turn. We
Did I
still have
start?
time.
Yeah,
Go on, Greg. Yeah, fire away.
I
Oh,
haven't-
I'm sorry, Greg.
I'm not sure, you
Yeah.
know, I appreciate everything you've said. It's really interesting stuff. I guess, you know, you've just come back into the community. You know how quickly and how our community changes, and you also know how we all feel that we're pretty special and it's pretty precious. And just what's your perspective on coming back into the valley, and what do you think is important? And what would you like to? And maybe you've just answered that, but you know, over the next 20 years is probably going to go by like that.
Yeah.
We're going to have a new airport. What, you know, how are we defining success in terms of community value and your own desire and your kids' desire to still come here?
That's a great question, and I could talk about that for a very long time. I mean, coming back to the community after, I guess, being away, we were still here, you know, regularly for those 4 years, actually 3 years, because when COVID hit, we actually moved back to the valley, and I worked from home. And so I've, you know, been back about a year and a half, and but I haven't seen people. Like it was strange. I would go skiing last winter, and I'd have my mask on, my helmet, my goggles, and nobody would even say hi to me. It was really kind of bizarre and actually refreshing. But you know, our kids grew up here. They went all the way through Aspen schools. This is home for them. So it is a precious, precious place. And, you know, change is inevitable. And one of the focal points of change is the airport, because it is right in the middle of town. It's highly visible, and it matters so much. And so people are going to have powerful opinions, right? And I get that. So one of the things I actually love about this community is that people do have strong opinions. They're not afraid to express them. And debate is robust. It can be frustrating at times, especially as leaders, you know, to be criticized. But the fact is there's really robust dialogue going on in this community. And I think that's been a great example for our kids and for our family to grow up with. You know, I dream about a diverse community. In Aspen, I worry that this valley is becoming less diverse. And, you know, I worked a lot on ESG issues for Altera, the new company I started.
What does that mean?
Pardon me?
ESG.
ESG, yeah, it's environmental, social, and governance. It's become an acronym in corporate circles these days, also called CSR, corporate social responsibility, things like that. So I worked a lot on, well, the environmental side and this platform of Altera for sure. I think that's really well established here, which is important. Actually, the leadership role of this valley in the environmental movement is I know it's already strong, but to keep foot on the gas there. Maybe a bad analogy. Foot on the electric vehicle pedal. Sorry.
Rheostat.
But you know, people don't. I would say that people worry a little bit too much about change, and change is hard, but change is inevitable. You know, you can't put. You know, as he said, the famous quote, who was it? Henry Beer, putting hairspray on Aspen and just freezing it, just like, it's just the way it was when you arrived. That's not possible, right? But I think we have you know, a lot of expertise in this valley, really strong leadership to manage the change that is inevitable in the valley. And one of the focal points, of course, is the airport for that. So I think responsible management of change is why we're here, and it'll continue to be that way in the next 20 years. And we're going to have a viable airport with really nice new regional aircraft coming in to Aspen-Picken County Airport 20 years from now, and it'll be solid. So I think.
Great. Thanks, David.
So I would like to freeze Aspen the way it was, freezing on the T-bar with my blue jeans frozen stiff with the lace-up boots that you couldn't undo them to tighten them
You know,
because they were all frozen.
Steve, when you ski in jeans, you can't fall because you leave those blue streaks on the snow. You know,
I do have one last question I'd like to ask. How aggressive do you think we should be with the FAA and the airlines and our congressional delegation on, you know, our vision and planning for the airport?
That's a great question. Let's start with the FAA because they have so much control over what we want to do. And I believe that a well-organized effort with the FAA, that this new board could play that role possibly, but a really organized effort with the FAA to build good relationships, build connections, and really advocate for our agenda. strongly. And I know there'll be pushback, and there's different departments. I dealt quite a bit with the FAA during my time running Stay Aspen Snowmass, and I know they'll hide behind the regulations, which is expected. However, they change too, and there's different people there too. And if we strongly advocate for what we believe in, we will be able, I think, to move the needle with the FAA. As far as being aggressive on other things, I do believe that we need to stand up with a unified voice and really speak loudly. And we have the opportunity, coming from this valley, to open a lot of doors in Washington, D.C., and where the regulatory bodies exist. Because I've gone to Washington, D.C. numerous times to advocate for, like, protect our winters and environmental issues on Capitol Hill. And if you show up with Aspen or this valley on your calling card, it opens doors immediately. People want to have a conversation with you. It's remarkable. And let's shamelessly use the power that we've got because of the profile this community has to advocate for the change that we want. So I'm a believer in standing up for what we believe in and communicating carefully, logically, but strongly for what we want to do.
Great, David. Thank you. All right. Any last final thoughts for our consideration?
Well, hey, you guys have a tough choice ahead of you.
do,
You have
yeah.
70 some odd applicants.
74 applications.
74. That's fantastic. I mean, that's a great testament to
That's huge.
how engaged this community is, right?
Totally.
And you had 15 interviews, and you're going to have to narrow it down. So, if you pick me, I'll be really happy. If you don't, I'll still stay engaged in some way and try and contribute. But I just really applaud what you're doing, and the airport's really important. You're handling it well and taking the right steps, and I'm here to support you. So
Thank you. And we will be probably setting up little subcommittees along the way, so hopefully we can keep a lot of people engaged, as we did with the 150 or whatever it was that first time around.
yeah, that was a big one.
That was huge. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time. I really
you.
appreciate it. I
It's
know I
really
went over
nice to
time
meet
to
you.
15, but
Oh, no, we're good.
being the
We're good.
last
you.
candidate, I guess that's
We're good. We
pull
are
that off.
good.
Right?
It was very nice to meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, you bet. All the
Okay.
best.
Welcome back, even though it's been a year and a half already.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, good to be back. Good to see you.
And I'll catch up with you on Rusty Gregory,
Ah, yes. Okay.
my high school days.
Yeah.
All right, board members, so we have the next hour scheduled for discussion. I do have a pretty hard stop at 1.
So does Greg has a
I have a
meeting to
very
start
hard
at
stop.
1.
Before
Okay.
1.
Okay, so we'll try to get as far as we get. Does anyone need a short break right this moment? Would you like
Quick drink of water. Be right back.
3 minutes? Sound good? All right, we'll be back at 12:05. Thank you.
As long as the public health meeting can run itself, I'll be fine. Yeah.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. After a brief break, it's November 12th, and we have concluded our interviews with the 15 applicants that we had selected for interview for the Airport Advisory Board. And so now, for the next 50 minutes, we have time slated for discussion. And I've been thinking about how we could frame this. So I just want to throw out some ideas for folks. I guess the first thing, I'll run through my thoughts and then I'll check in with you. So my first thing is whether we should check in and say, are folks prepared, or does someone need to sleep on it? Because that will make our conversation very short. Otherwise, I think we need to keep in mind our list. We have several applicants that are from Down Valley. And I think our bylaws have restricted us to the number of residents outside of Pickens County that we can appoint. Additionally, I believe everyone that we interviewed are meet the residential criteria, so we don't have to worry about that so much. And then I would suggest that perhaps we work through the list that we originally called from and start at the top with the candidates that had the most consensus and work down to those that had the least as we start discussion. And then finally, we also have to keep in mind when we get down to our list of 9, which 2 will be our alternates, and then which ones will run the 3-year term, the 2-year term, and then the 1-year term. I would probably suggest that those candidates with the most consensus have the longest terms, and then work down that way.
That's a good idea.
So those are just my thoughts on how to structure
Could you
this.
explain that one more time?
Sure.
So what you're saying is that we choose them all now, they all start, and then in a few years, one person retires and somebody else comes in, so some people will go, what is the term, 6 years?
Yeah, I believe the board took off that requirement to where they could be re-upped. I'd have to go back and look at the bylaws, but I don't think you limited it to 6 years.
Oh, turn your mic
Yeah.
on, please, Rich.
I don't believe the board limited it to 6 years, so it's just whether the board reappoints whenever you open those up again. So it's on the board.
Like, a certain number will only serve 1 year, and then their position will be up for application again. And they could reapply, or
Right.
somebody new could reapply for us to interview.
And then they would be appointed for a 3-year term at that point.
Oh, 3-year term,
Yes, they're 3-year terms.
okay,
Yeah.
3-year terms, okay.
They're just, the first term has to be staggered,
Yeah,
so that
right.
we're not replacing the
But we
whole
start
board.
everybody together.
And, yeah,
Right.
exactly. So that's what I propose. Yes, Greg?
Question. First of all, what's our time frame on this? Is there a sense of urgency that we have to get this done today? And 2, well, that's the main question. Like, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable trying to get this done in the next 45 minutes, which is all I've got. The Board of Health meeting starts, immediately at 1, and so I'll be thinking about that before it starts too. So I'm not sure you're going to have me for the full hour, and I'm wondering, honestly, I think I could do a better job here if I could sleep on this and kind of go through it before I came back to the group. Because right now I could make a hasty decision, and you know what? All the decisions are good. I have to say, I like everybody on this board, and whoever doesn't get onto the committee, I'm hoping that they join one of the other advisory committees to this, group. But still, I kind of feel as if I want to absorb all the notes. I took 14 pages of notes, and I want to go through that and remember the things people said that were pertinent, because we have a lot of overlap. We have a lot of diversity here, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to process that, and I don't know if I can do that right now.
I can understand that. Would it be helpful for us to do similarly like we did in the first round, is send Rich our list of
Yeah.
our 9?
That would- I
And
could
then
do-
see where there's, we could have 6 that
Maybe
we
like
all
a-
agree to, and then have to deliberate over the other 3.
Sure. It'd be like a ranked
That's what I
choice
was gonna
voting.
suggest. That's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Well, I've spent a lot of time throughout and in between ranking and putting the number of stars and highlighting the things that they said that I thought were important or not important, and things that they said that made me think, well, maybe not. And so, I don't know, I wouldn't mind having a little bit of discussion, like for instance, things like, well, we can't really have 3 people from SKICO. Like, you know, that kind of thing. I think we're probably all in agreement that that would look a little weird if we had 3 SKICO people on a panel of 7 people. I mean, maybe other people don't feel that way, but that's the way I feel. And then, how many Down Valley people do we have for how many Down Valley slots? That
There's 4 of them, we can only take 2.
Who's the
maximum.
4th? I only have 3.
well, one of them lives in Basalt, but he
Valerie.
lives in Picking
Well,
Yeah,
County.
Valerie's,
There's
it's a
Auden
change.
is in Basalt, Meg is near Glenwood. Debbie Braun and Valerie Braun are both Carbondale or Frying Pan. So there are 4
Is
currently
Auden in
living
Eagle
down
County?
out
Or
of
is
the
he-
county.
Oh, he's in
Basalt.
Eagle, yeah.
So
What about Michael
so,
Solons, because he's listed here as
Who?
Pickin and Eagle.
He's he's a Starwood.
Yeah.
yeah, he's
Okay.
fully Starwood.
Got it.
So it was Auden and Debbie Braun and Valerie Braun and who else?
Meg Haynes.
Meg
Oh, yeah.
Haynes. Yeah, and the question I have, I don't have a problem with giving Greg more time or giving all of us more time. I think Kelly's suggestion, which I was gonna suggest too, it's very helpful if we make our list and see where I think we will have some where we're right on the mark. And I think that would be a great help, and then we can just really discuss the 3 or 4 or 5, whoever, how many other.
I think that's a good
things.
idea.
Yeah, but it's time. I don't know what our time frame is gonna be. I would rather try and get them seated before the end of the year. So that gives us some time. I don't know, because the holidays are gonna make it tough to have meetings for us and for them. So I just think that's something Kelly and I and staff can figure out a time when we can meet it. It could be another special day where we meet for an hour or 2.
Do you
get
have
her
a
done.
top 1 or 2, or are you just all over the place?
I don't have a top 1 or 2 right now, which is just surprising to me.
He has a top 15,
I have a top,
feeling.
I have a top, 15, honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I
Good.
think it's gonna need some, but I could do it overnight and I could talk to y'all tomorrow or Monday or
I think
Tuesday.
there's
or-
3 I could axe right now.
Really?
There's 3 what?
I can be brutal about this stuff, efficient.
There's 3 X's?
3 that I could just take off the list.
Yeah, I have that.
But
it's the
that's,
same.
leaves me with 12.
Gosh, I only have 1. I feel like I'm failing over here.
So
I do want to, I mean, for me, there is some urgency. I'll just say, Greg, like, for example, I have concerns about the Embraer 175 that I think we may see coming in here. And I feel like this board should weigh in on that and, like, should decide if we want to start communicating with the airlines about such a decision and how we want to have an open line of communication with the airlines, because one of our recommendations was to engage them on the types of planes that they would be flying into Aspen. And it is here, right? Like, this decision is, like, a decision in that realm is at our forefront. And so I do feel like there is a bit of an urgency, that there is plenty of work for this board to, like, start engaging at. So I don't want to, like, kick it to next year.
Oh, no, I had no idea plan. I was thinking a few days
Okay.
at the most.
Okay.
Yeah, we have our list submitted to Rich by Monday.
That works.
Oh, guys, this is a full weekend for me.
Well, you've already got it, though. You just said.
You said you were already done.
Steve,
So I need to sleep on it. I'd like to look at a couple of the interviews again because a couple people talked quietly and I had a hard time hearing everything they said. And I think watching on Grassroots, it always comes through louder on there. And right now I could probably come up with 6. The 6 I'd want is the voting members. The hard ones are the 2 alternates
You
to
get
me.
7
that
voting and 2.
I can think of 6 I would want to put on there. The other ones are the difficult ones. I can probably think of 3 out of the 6 I would put on the no column, but
Really?
uh,
I'm
there's-
dying to know.
figuring out those last couple is a tricky part. So I suggest maybe we each sleep on it, and I mean, I suggest too, maybe at Tuesday's work session, that we might be able to do this next week.
We're booked for the next.
I can't remember what else is on the
Yeah.
agenda on Tuesday.
Budget.
What?
And we have to have time to revisit our discussion on the new positions, because that
We're booked from
direction
9 to
needs
5 on
come
Tuesday,
next
all the way
Tuesday.
through.
So I don't think we have time on Tuesday.
And rather than voting for 9, I would say maybe we each vote for 7 and see what happens. Because we're not all gonna vote for the same 7.
So we can rank the next 2 by how many?
And then maybe we'll end up with
Consensus?
9 people who are the top.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Do we
And the
wanna-
bottom 2 then could be the alternate. That would be one way we could decide.
Do we want to talk a little bit, though, about what we want to, how the structure of the board that we want to see? Do we want one of those 2 young guys? Do we count Auden as a young guy? You know, I mean, considering
He
a
would like
lot of
that.
them are in their 70s, Auden looks pretty damn young, you know?
He's 51.
Do we just say the guys in their 30s? Do
Making
we
me feel
want
young.
to be
Thanks,
sure we
Francie.
have at least 1 woman? Do we want to have 2 women? Is there something like that we want to talk about?
I think those are individual choices, and if we all submit our ranked choices, and Rich throws those into the hopper, I think those will rise to the surface, because I've been thinking the same exact questions.
I
Like,
agree.
I'd love to see as many women as possible on this board, but I also realize we've got a balance to maintain, and I wish we'd had more women applicants in this list, but we don't. I'm trying to balance between the wisdom and longevity of people who've been here forever and involved and deeply versus the younger perspectives who are going to be inheriting this. So I'm in the same boat. I think we're thinking the same things, and the only way I can see to do it kind of, the thing that would be most comfortable for me would be to have my own idea in my head of how I want to rank it, the list, before I put it into the hopper with all of you. And then I think whatever comes out of that is going to be good. I'm pretty confident.
But would your thinking be influenced by, you have to choose a woman, you have to choose somebody under 70, you have to choose only 2 people from Skiko, any kind of thing like that? Do you want that in your mind as you make your list? So especially you, since you think all 15 are okay. I mean, should that kind of thinking be guiding your choices, is what I'm
I
asking.
guess I'd love to be able to choose that. I'd like to have my internal biases choose that rather than have a rule there for me.
You mean you'd
I know
rather
for
pick
me
the
that
people?
I'm gonna choose 7 people that will make a great board.
Mhm.
So like I'm putting forward a board slate,
Uh-huh.
not necessarily
The balance.
That's a great-
yes,
Yeah.
like that's how
Yeah.
I'm thinking of it. And there will be probably some candidates that won't make it on the list because they don't offer the balance in the board that I would like to see.
I think
So
we're
this
all-
person,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
So this person might have made your list, except that you already have somebody like that.
Right.
So you're gonna elevate this person.
Right. That's how I'm
That's what I was
thinking
gonna say.
about
I think
it.
we're gonna all, I think our core thing for all of us is gonna be to have a diverse representation on the board that can work well together. Because we don't want one, for me, I'm gonna say this, when I'm looking at that with my own gut, is I don't want somebody who's really, really strong in this one field, who then may not work well with the others at the table. So we need to have that balance, that diversity, and I think we have 15 great candidates, and I think Steve's idea maybe is great, just do 7, and then, we'll have some that are in that next margin, and we can then discuss further. I mean, we did an amazing job of taking 74 applicants and coming down with this many, that we all had put names out there. That, for us, says a lot, that we were all thinking in the kind of the same direction, but using our own minds to get there. So I think that we'll pull it off, and I think Monday would be a great time, or sometime over the weekend.
You
to
do
put
end
it
of day
toge-
Monday?
What about Monday
No, just getting a list to Rich.
as the deadline, not talking to each other?
No,
Getting the list
just
to
getting the
Rich.
list to Rich. We'll let him put it together, and it could be, we've got our 7, all right, we don't know. I think that's a great place to start. Kelly and I can work with staff on seeing when we might be able to schedule a time, sometime after, probably. And then we got the holiday coming, and then but we'll get budget done, and then we'll have a little more time. Does that sound
If
okay?
we not make it Monday, I'm leaving from here and I'm going to my son's hockey games in Colorado Springs first I'm going to Vail to take care of my grandchildren, then I'm going to hockey games in Colorado Springs, and then I'm going to the Wolf thing, and I won't be back in town till Monday night, then I'm leaving.
Well, I
today.
have the weekend booked, and I'm gonna find time to do, because you get so much of your homework right there. I don't think it's that hard to put it together and get it to Rich. No later than Tuesday morning, that gives you Monday night.
How much time did you want?
Yeah, try,
Well, I was thinking end of day Tuesday, maybe, how does that impact you?
It's just time putting it back together, but I know we aren't gonna be able to get back together on Tuesday, so, and it doesn't take that long to
Yeah.
compile it. I
But
can get
just
it back out.
Tuesday is the busiest day
You could
between
have a
now and
Tuesday
then.
lunch
Tuesday's
meeting.
packed.
We could all have lunch together. We could do have a working lunch Tuesday.
Tuesday is packed, you guys.
Lunch isn't,
yeah.
though. We're gonna
You're
take a
gonna
lunch
want a
break. aren't we?
break.
we're gonna
on
want a
Tuesday.
break.
So
Okay.
Tuesday or Wednesday's fine if
Tuesday
Francine needs.
midnight, Wednesday, end of day? What works for
Oh,
you?
Wednesday, forget Wednesday, that's ski code day. I guess I could do it by Monday night, it's just, I'll figure it out.
Well, we can do, I just don't know when he'll find any time on Tuesday, because Tuesday is crazy, but
I actually think it's not gonna take a long time. I just
Tuesday's
wanna
fine.
have
Tuesday would be fine.
a brief window to contemplate it without having to do it in the next 20
Mhm.
minutes.
Sure.
And you only have like 15 more minutes now anyway.
Yeah.
I'll say midnight Tuesday. That works.
So Rich, stay up.
That's when Rich goes to bed every night at midnight, isn't it?
I'm always up that late these
That
days.
works,
Too much
Kelly,
going
that's
on.
fine, it gives us all a little more time, I'm okay.
Okay, are we clear on what we're all doing? We're forwarding 7 names each?
One other thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I've sort of been lumping people in categories, thinking the young people, we probably want to try to get a young person on there. But then there's another category that hasn't been mentioned, and that's those with technical expertise who might be better serve the committee as a resource person. And we need to keep that in mind too, that even if we eliminate somebody, we hope that they can still be used by the committee or on one of the subcommittees or something like that. I would hope all 15 of these people could be plugged in somewhere in our process.
Do we wanna make a subcommittee recommendation also, if you're thinking along those
Let's
lines?
just see where we get with the 7.
Well, I think it would be up to the committee to decide what subcommittees they
need.
want.
Yeah.
Maybe it's terminal design or
good point.
something that we don't, unforeseen stuff that,
I just have to make a comment while we're all together. I found it so interesting that the 2 youngest people were the most conservative in their approach to change and stuff. I just found that fascinating. Like, we shouldn't rush it, we don't want to make too many changes too fast, and some of the older people were like, yes, this is our moment, let's move fast, but so
The
interesting
young
to
ones
me.
know they're gonna be alive for another 50 years.
Yeah, I
The
know.
old ones know they might not be.
Their time's running out. I was just fascinated by that, though. Like,
Yes, there
wow.
was one young person that stood out, I think, more than the other, so I think we all know who that is, so.
Okay,
All
thank you.
right.
Thank you for
Okay, so that's
indulging me.
Tuesday midnight. Please forward your list of 7.
11:59.
And then when are we gonna talk about it?
Well, we have to look at
We,
time.
we'll have to find time in future agendas.
Tight.
But will we make it work? Always. So. All right. Thank you all.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you all. This was good. You
Kelly,
all
I do
showed up
have
with
one
good
question. The ex
questions. Yes, Rich.
officios are also set up as the bylaws go in staggered terms. Are you all wanting to decide to appoint them to their terms as well, or do you want them to fight among themselves about who's gonna
think they
serve?
should fight
Two
among
of them are city
themselves.
managers, and then the other is a staff person out of the SALT. So
City manager of where?
Aspen and the town manager of Snowmass
They're
Village.
crazy. That's amazing they want to do that.
Well, I think the boards, actually the elected officials felt that'd be a good rep to start out with.
Because they were
So-
smart.
so-
So,
Plus, they
assuming
could
that
tell
the
them they have
county
to do it.
manager will be there all the time.
John?
What's that? I'm sorry?
Assuming the county manager will be there all the time, I mean.
No, it'd be represented by Dan or myself.
Dan.
Dan will be there.
Yeah, so Dan is gonna be the main contact for the board. He'll be
And he
there.
can't wait.
the guy.
So when we're contemplating this list of 7, we do have to remember the ex officio members, and I hadn't even thought about them lately, to tell you the truth.
And
I
so
wish-
who are they
I
again?
kind of wish we'd interviewed
Or at the
them.
bottom.
Well, it's,
The bottom of what?
It's their,
Oh.
it's the
Yeah.
cities and the
their
town's
appointments.
choices.
Yeah,
who
they
they
left it
appoint.
up to those.
It's up to them to
individual
decide,
boards to
yeah.
Yeah,
appoint
those
them.
appointments were
anyway.
not in our hands at all, and we wanted one from
Yeah,
each
but they're going to
jurisdiction.
change the culture of this group.
So now, the gal from Basalt, she was working for in our planning department,
Yes,
is that
that's
correct?
my understanding. Yeah, she's the engineer.
And she
now
was
there in
the
Basalt.
engine, was she
Oh,
the
is it-
engineer in?
In Basalt, she is.
I
I'm not
mean,
sure what
what
role
was
she
she
played here.
here?
I'm not sure what role she played here.
What is her
She's an
name?
engineer? you said?
Catherine Christoph.
Yeah.
She
Yeah,
was
she's an
she was our
engineer by
planning
training.
engineer. She's an
I-
engineer.
So she was in the comm dev department.
She's really
Oh, there's
sharp.
John, yeah.
She was our planning engineer.
Yeah, she's
Yes.
great.
Okay, that's
And
what
so
I thought.
who,
Thank you, John.
do we know
That's
who the Aspen
history.
and TOSV will be? Did you say?
Be Sarah.
Aspen is Sarah,
Sarah,
and
and
Snowmass
then
It
is.
is at the bottom of your list right there, Greg.
Oh, thank
I
you.
know,
It's
I
right here in
didn't know
front of
that. I
me.
didn't notice that
Hello.
either until she said
Thank
that.
you.
Kelly, you're so
And there are
smart.
2 women
Rich
there,
put
so
it on there.
that's
He's-
something.
Where is
prepared.
that, where is that list? I
So
already
there's 2
lost
women
it.
there. So, okay, so we have the 7 and 2 alternates and the 3 ex officio,
Correct,
and that's it.
that's it.
Oh, that actually helps me.
There, you can
Yeah,
get
I
the
saw- I know,
spelling
I just saw
right.
that. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay,
We clear?
I'm clear.
All right.
11:59
Thank you all
on
for the
Tuesday.
great suggestions.
So our list of 7 is just who we want on the core, in the core.
And if
group.
there's overlap with our 7, we'll have another selection for our alternates. I'm probably gonna do 7 with an addendum that just says I have these people, because I pretty much have 7 selected with my alternates already. So,
I
I
have
guess if
7.
someone wants to suggest alternates, when you let Rich know, we could do that.
I'm gonna
too.
do an
I
addendum.
think we should do that.
I'm gonna do my 7 and then some alternate choices.
There you go. We can
Yeah.
do that. Fine.
And it's sort of like this weighted voting thing they're doing, so similar, kind of similar to that, I guess.
That's how we came up with the top 15, and we did a
Yeah.
really good job of doing that.
Okay.
And I
thank you
think,
all.
my feeling is we'll probably have our slate all figured out without having to get together and
You are
talk
such
about
an
it.
optimist.
I know. I'm
That's
thinking
why
at
we-
least 4 or 5.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we will.
And if we don't have a clear decision on a few of them, then we're gonna have to schedule time and get together and talk about.
Well, we're gonna probably schedule time and get together to talk about it, so we see the list.
Maybe Skiko will just fly by on Wednesday and we'll have this whole afternoon in front of us.
Kelly has to get on the road Wednesday
I
night.
do.
What
We
time
do
is it?
have
So
a
it will
couple
fly
of
by.
land use things that will.
We have another
take
land use that's
the
gonna
time
take-
that they take.
And are you sick?
Am I sick?
Yeah, your voice is different today.
It's a little, I have had a little bit of a, like runny nose.
Yeah.
How's
My children are all
Aloysius?
boogery.
Did you get an update on Aloysius?
He has 2 stitches.
First one?
Oh, what
No
happened?
tears.
Need some of that airborne stuff for the airport discussion.
What
Yeah.
happened?
Aloysius fell at school.
I also haven't been sleeping very much because we're moving this week.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
wow.
Yeah.
And you're leaving out to go out of town?
Yep.
Oh, great.
She's smart. So first stitches, huh?
First stitches, yeah. He's fine. He's back at school. All right, well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate working with you all and all the great questions you all asked.
That was great. Thank you, guys.
And
About the vehicle
we
fire?
will.
Where are you-
What's that?
Where are you going for
recon-
your
Let me just wrap this
Board
up.
of
So
Health meeting?
we will reconvene at our work session at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, where we will continue to talk about the 2022 Picken County budget. Thank you to anyone who watched, and thank you to staff, and thank you, Grassroots.
Have a good weekend.
All right. All right.
Yeah, Francie. that
Car
was just-
fire? Yeah, what happened?
I just